Superintendent, I have someone to say hello to you.
Oh,
I know you like your puppies.
what's that?
This is my puppy. I said,
Oh, look at, get out. She looks, is a girl or boy?
boy, but he has a pink collar.
He looks just like my cocoa bean.
Oh.
Seriously, looks exactly like my cocoa bean. I'm going to show you a picture. I honestly can't believe, put her up there. Oh, he's so cute.
He's,
Oh,
he
same kind of marking, same head, same kisses, everything.
thinks he's a lap dog and he's not. He's too big.
Look at.
What kind is he?
He's a lab blue hound tick mix. Oh yeah, look at the white belly.
Whoa.
Look
Very
just
nice.
like Coco.
So cute.
Oh my goodness.
So sorry.
They look related.
I'll have to get over there and see him, give him lots of love.
Well, he loves his love, that's for sure.
How old now?
I think he's 4 months. 4 months.
Oh, they're so much fun when they're little.
Just like children.
Yeah, they are. They're just lovable like that, aren't they? Good family friends. I miss my Coco. I can't have pets, so she's with my children.
Oh.
But, yeah. Maybe next year.
Yeah, we get a yard, you'd be good.
Or just an apartment that allows me to have a pet.
Good. Good, good. Plenty of dog parks around too.
Well, you're in for a treat, Madam Chair. We have a couple of superstars with us today talking about Build BPS and libraries and safety and all the good work going on. So I think it's a great opportunity today to highlight some of the good things going on.
Absolutely.
Not so much pandemic, which will be good. Shift for a minute here to talk about some of the strategic work and that we're engaged in.
Good.
I need to change where I'm sitting in the house because I am I just need to change. Kaden.
Yeah, I was out in school today, which is great. I was started at the Higginson, the baby Higginson, and then I went over to Lee, K8 to look at our food nutrition, our new quality food. Oh my gosh, they're cooking food on site and it looks amazing. Fresh salads, fresh fruit, wraps that they're doing, spaghetti and meatballs. And I mean, they're just really excited. Next week, they got a little Thanksgiving wrap that they're doing with turkey. And so it's fun to see that that's finally taking shape. And then I ended up at Tech Boston and spent some time there. So
That's great. How is meal delivery going?
Good. Yeah, they were doing also the groceries pack today and handing out. They were doing that at a couple of sites. So they do that in collaboration with the YMCA. So that's good. And now I'm back here. How long do you think this will go?
Hopefully not that long. We're at 4 o'clock now, so I'm ready to get started. Is your team here?
I see the safety team is here. I see Deb Froggett. And
And you can look at the attendee list. If there's anyone there that you need me to bring over, I'm happy to bring them
Ryan
over.
McLaughlin will need to get into the room, probably Rob Consalvo.
I don't see them yet in waiting room.
Okay, I'm surprised if they're not on yet.
Sam, superintendent.
Is Sam, I don't see Sam on.
No, we'll just need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sam DePina.
All right, it'll take us a couple minutes to get started anyway. Is it Carrie or Candace running the show there tonight?
Carrie today. I am just waiting for confirmation that we're live on the web, and I will let you know when we get that.
Beautiful, thank you.
No problem.
Anissa, when are we letting them meet?
There's a puppy.
Hey, counselor. Hey, how come you guys all got your puppies?
Well, me because I'm eating my lunch and dinner right now at the same time.
Aw,
Gideon's very perceptive to when food is around.
they're so sweet.
I think it's because he's half mouse.
Yep. It does amaze me how they know how to beg and do all of that.
They're sweet.
What amazes me is that I'm next to our street, obviously, and you can be walking as quietly as you would like across the street, and Gideon will know even if he's nowhere near a window, and it's usually when I'm in the middle of speaking on Zoom, and he will just lose his little mind. The pitfalls of working from home.
Madam Chair, I just got confirmation we're live on the web, so we're ready to go when you are.
Thank you. Go in 1 minute.
Let's see if my folks are in the room. I see Sam's been promoted. I still don't see Brian.
Do you want Nate or Monica moved up?
Nate might be needing to be moved up. Rob said he's watching from the city website.
Okay, so he's good.
He
What
said
about
Carrie
Neva
will,
and Kim
Carrie will
Pelican?
let people in. I don't know. Maybe he wants to be in. I don't think Rob needs to be in, but
Okay, well, if he needs to come in, he'll come over. I think we'll be
Right.
good.
We're here, Sam.
okay.
Okay, great, thanks.
It's Deb, Neva, and Brian who will be doing the presenting with me.
Perfect. And we do have one person that was going to testify in a later panel, but has a time restraint, so we bumped her up just to give her testimony, her statement early.
It looks
So I'm
like
ready
we're,
to go. Is everybody ready to go?
yep.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anise Saibi George, and I'm chair of the Boston City Council's Committee on Education. In accordance with Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 executive order modifying certain requirements of the open meeting law and relieving public bodies of certain requirements, the City Council will be conducting this hearing virtually. This enables the City Council to carry out its responsibilities while adhering to public health recommendations and ensuring public access to its deliberations through adequate alternative means. Today's hearing is on 3 dockets: 0273, order for a hearing regarding Build BPS; 0274, order for a hearing to analyze the safety and security measures taken to protect school environments from threatening situations; and docket 0937, order for a hearing regarding libraries and library staff in the Boston Public Schools. This public hearing is being recorded and live streamed on boston.gov/city-council-TV. It will also be rebroadcast at a later date on Comcast 8, RCN 82, and Verizon 1964. We will take public testimony at the end of this hearing. If you wish to testify via video conference, please email juan.lopez@boston.gov to sign up. When you are called, please state your name and affiliation or residence and limit your comments to no more than 2 minutes to ensure that all comments can be heard. You can also submit written testimony by emailing ccc.education@boston.gov. This afternoon, I'm joined by a few colleagues. First, Councilor O'Malley, who's the co-sponsor of the first docket, 0273, Councilor Arroyo, and Councilor Liz Braden. I will briefly introduce the panelists and give my colleagues an opportunity for opening remarks. We have with us the Superintendent of the Boston Public Schools, Brenda Cassellius. We have the Director of Libraries, Dr. Deborah Froggatt, who is the Director of Library Services. And for a presentation, we will have Dr. Melanie Kimball, who's the Director of School Library Teacher concentration at Simmons School of Library and Information Sciences. From Safety Services, we have Neva Coakley-Grice, who's the Boston Public Schools Chief of Safety Services, Kim Pelletrew, who's Executive Director of BPS Safety Services, and Sam Tapina, who's the Chief of Operations for the Boston Public Schools. And regarding some of the Build BPS questions and comments and presentation, We will have Brian McLaughlin, who's the Boston Public Schools Director of Capital Planning, and he'll also there be joined by Sam DePina. We have some others that I'll introduce when we get to that point. But I'm curious if any of my colleagues have brief opening statements. I'll start with Councilor Braden.
In the interest of time, I will hold my comments, and I look forward to hearing what everyone has to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor, for that. I actually don't see Councilor O'Malley on our screen. He is a co-sponsor of one of the dockets. Perhaps he'll be joining us soon. Councilor Arroyo, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And similarly, these are all three very important sort of meaty subjects. So I'm happy to cede my opening remarks so that we can get right into it.
Great, thank you very much, Councilor Arroyo. I do have a little bit of an opening statement just to set the stage and the table for this afternoon. This pandemic has given us an opportunity to think critically about how our school facilities are as they currently are and how they could be. Our facilities tell a story about the choices we as a city have made. Our schools are places of academic, social, and emotional learning. They also implicitly tell our students and staff how much their environments matter to us as a city. 2 of these dockets were filed in January and 1 docket filed this fall. All 3 speak to the long-standing issues with our facilities. I hope that we will use this time to consider how we can create a better future for the Boston Public Schools so that the district is leading the way to building a green and energy efficient district, that the buildings themselves are physically safe and healthy spaces to be in, and that we are making the necessary investments to provide high quality education in every school. While we were still figuring out how to provide safe in-person learning to our highest need students, this pandemic is giving us time to improve our facilities with minimal disruption to our school communities. I'm sorry, the puppy is here and is being distracting. How can we ensure that our students will return to buildings that make them feel wanted and safe, that make them feel like learning is an exciting pursuit and they have resources available to them to help them explore? What can we do now to nurture the foundations for lifelong learning? What will we do now to create a better district for tomorrow? I am excited to be here with all of you today to discuss these matters, and we'll get rid of this puppy in time. Thank you, everyone, for being with us, and I'll turn it over to the superintendent. Dr.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members, for being here, counselors. Just so excited to talk a little bit about something other than COVID directly, some of the strategic work that we've been working on with libraries, also the work that we have been engaged in prior to my arrival, even with Build BPS, and kind of update you on some of the major projects. We won't be able to speak about some of the other projects that are in the Build BPS just yet because we still have some community engagement to do prior to the school committee. But we want to talk to you about the Quincy, the Carter, and the Boston Arts Academy and where we're at with those designs, as well as some of our capital projects coming up that we are doing to address some of our facility concerns that you talked about, Madam Chair, around COVID and our COVID response. We also will be hearing from Neva Coakley-Grice, who will be speaking about our safety division and some of the work we did with data privacy policy. We're so pleased with that policy. It took a while getting there over the past 8 months, but we got there by broad work with our community. And so I'm excited for them to talk about that. So I'm not going to talk a lot. I'm going to just turn it right over to our Chief Librarian, Deb Froggett, who's going to give you a little bit of an update on our libraries. And then we'll take some questions, and then we'll go back to Chief Coakley-Grice, and then she'll make her presentation. We'll take some questions, that's okay, and then we'll go right into the Build BPS, which might be where most of your questions are at. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Deb.
Thank you. Good afternoon, City Councilors, and thank you, Dr. Cassellius. Councilwoman Asabi George, thank you for this opportunity. Carrie, I believe you're going to be sharing the slide deck with the community. So I hope that that's been queued up. There we go. Here we go. Thank you. So first you will see a table, and on this table there are numbers that represent the school library programs by school grade band. And then alongside of each of the grade, and you can see there is that high school, middle schools, and elementary schools are represented. And then below the total number of programs in each grade band, it shows how many certified librarians and paraprofessionals are dedicated to each one of those. Oops, somehow it skipped away, but that's okay. Although there's a lot of work still to be done regarding school libraries and access to them relative to the statistics that Councilwoman Sabi George stated in the docket and she garnered those statistics from the 2017-21 strategic plan. We have strengthened partnerships with BPL, renewed numerous library spaces, applied best practices from the 2018 National School Library Standards, and drafted a selection policy, and also have been integrating culturally and linguistically sustaining practices in all of these areas. So to give you a minute just to take a look at those statistics since they're back up. So then we move on to Boston Public Library collaborations. The BPS Library Services and BPL continue to have a strong partnership. And I want to thank President David Leonard and the Director of Youth Services, Faruka Abazite, for supporting the program growth that is listed here. Oops, if you would please go back one slide. This is why I'm not sharing my screen, which is fine. Thank you, Carrie. Oh, goodness. Well, I can speak to, for some reason, that slide is not there. I can speak to the partnerships I have. I did script this because I'm always so worried that I'm going to miss something. So this year we're working to ensure that all students have a library card number that will be integrated into BPS's student information system. It's called Aspen. This way, if students would like to use a BPL database or an e-resource that requires a barcode, a teacher can easily access their BPL barcode number. And also for older students, BPS and BPL are striving to imprint a BPL barcode on the student's ID. Thus, the student one card could serve as a library card, a picture ID, and their T-Pass. So a young person, particularly one that's not driving, would have one card to track up. Another partnership with BPL is they graciously offer BPS and all of Boston students actually take advantage of the ebook platform Sora. Our students' residency serve as a library card number in Aspen, and I send many thank yous to them.
Is it? I'm sorry. Is it me or is it a bad connection?
Am I breaking up?
Now you're very clear, Deborah, but you were breaking
Oh, good. Okay, I'm glad, because sometimes I have issues like it just, don't we all? But anyway, I do want to send BPS's tech department a huge thank you, because they embedded the Sora platform in the Clever backpack, and that's a single sign-on. It gives the seamless access to a myriad of ebooks for even the youngest learners in BPS. This past summer, once again, BPL and BPS collaborated on Summer Reading Together 2020. This is the 5th year that we've done this. A team of BPL children's and young adult librarians, BPS ELA teachers, and BPS library team members have and continue to collaborate on culturally relevant titles for rising 1st through 12th graders. BPL also offers homework help at all of the branches, and many of the BPS high school students serve as tutors. homework help does vary from school to school, and many BPS students certainly take advantage of it. And then finally, the Metro Boston Library Network, which is the integrated library system that the BPL branches use, is also used by 25 BPS libraries. And thus students can place holds and many can access interlibrary loan services through that. And so I'm very grateful to BPL for these partnerships that create access to great resources for our kids. And then now for this slide, since 2016, Library Services has worked with school leaders to support renewing library spaces. And what I mean by renewing a space is that when a space has been closed, I work with the school community and the school leaders to refresh a facility and the collection. Or in the case of the Dearborn, I consult with BPS facilities and the school leaders on creating a library learning commons design for new construction. I do want to apologize. Greater Eggleston is left out, and they have a great new renovated learning commons space. And it was really wonderful to work with my past Fenway colleague, Kevin Brill, on that project. And in a few minutes, you'll hear the Build BPS presentation about BAA, the Carter and the Quincy Upper. And I had the good fortune of consulting on those projects as well. And as an aside, I was library director for BAA Fenway when BAA and Quincy Upper partnered more than 10 years ago to talk about new school library projects. So it's really, really gratifying to see these projects coming into their own. And then finally, I'd like to add here that during the last 4 years, 8 BPS teachers and library paraprofessionals have achieved school library certification, and I'm very proud of them. And I was able to collaborate with Melanie with a few, and actually Simmons places a lot of student teachers and a lot of students to observe BPS school librarians. So it's a wonderful partnership there. And then finally, last but certainly not least, library services and team members are very cognizant of culturally and linguistically sustaining practices. We have a selection development policy that prioritizes book selection, obviously, but it sustains that and books that sustain students' cultures and present a thorough, inclusive process if a book is challenged. We also have studied Zaretta Hammond's text, Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain. We did that in 2018 and 19. And this text continues to be a reference for the team alongside of the BPS equity tool. We use that when we develop any new programs and practices. And then I would just like to close by sharing that the library services team members do support a culture of reading and readers with their English language arts programs in their given schools. They're teaching students how to use Sora, that BPL platform there, and this allows students to enlarge their independent reading prowess, if you will. And it's all about agency and equitable access for students. The library services team members also integrate access to digital resources for background knowledge and for further research across the academic content by collaborating with teachers. Students use the library services virtual learning commons. You could Google that and explore that. That is being used across the district. And then I'll just close with, we have been employing a research model. It's called guided inquiry design. And it is a way for student or teachers and librarians to plan project-based and resource-based learning. So thank you for this opportunity. And I pass it back to Dr. Casilius.
Thank you, Deb. I'm not sure, Madam Chair, if you want me to take questions on the library now, or if
No,
you.
I'd love to just go through all of the
Okay.
presentations, then we'll do a round of questions.
That'd be
But I
great.
will, just because it is the context of the library presentation, I'd like Dr. Kimball to go next, just because she has a presentation related to library services and has
Okay.
a time crunch. And I also want to acknowledge that we've been joined by Councilor Matt O'Malley, who is the co-sponsor of the Build BPS hearing order, and Councilor Campbell, as well as Councilor Flynn and Councilor Mejia. Thank you. Dr. Kimball, thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me to come and speak to you. I don't have a formal presentation the way that Deborah just gave you. I'm just going to talk to you. I am an associate professor and the director of the school library teacher concentration at the School of Library and Information Science at Simmons University. I have been a teacher at Simmons for 13 years now, and I've been the director of this school program for 5. I've been asked to talk to you about the importance of libraries in schools. And I guess my passion for this comes from the fact that I truly believe that libraries are not just important to schools. I think they are centrally important to schools because they cover every angle. They cover every field of study. They cover all ages of school children. Study after study has shown that academic achievement and test scores tend to be higher in schools that have a full-time certified librarian. I'm of course assuming that all schools have libraries, which I know is not the case. So that's a given. You got to have a library and a full-time certified librarian. Better reading scores tend to follow school libraries that have appropriate funding. Information retrieval and evaluation skills are something that librarians teach to children, and those skills will last for a lifetime, no matter what the format is or how the format changes. Understanding how to retrieve information, how to evaluate information to make sure that it's the best information is incredibly important. School library, current time, not COVID time, not counting, of course. School libraries provide a broadband, high-speed internet to those students who don't have access to it, much like they're also bridged by public libraries that provide the same. School librarians and school libraries help prepare students for careers and college readiness. And librarians, I think something that's important is we always think about librarians in terms of children, but they collaborate with other teachers to provide resources and skills. And that collaboration is incredibly important. And the other thing that I think sometimes gets left out is libraries as space. The library provides a space for students to go to do group work, to do study, to spend time absorbing spend time doing other kinds of work. So that school libraries, to me, that's a no-brainer. They're very important. Having a full-time certified school librarian is incredibly important as well. The other thing I was asked to talk about was diversity in librarianship, and how do we achieve a more diverse school library teacher. I will have to admit that the field of librarianship in general is probably less diverse than the field of education. That's a little bit anecdotal. I don't actually have a study to back that up, but just that's my sense, is that we are not as diverse as we could be, not for want of trying. The American Library Association has a diversity office that's been trying very hard for years to diversify this profession that carries over into the school library profession. At Simmons, we've been talking very much about that this year, especially because we have this time where we're working with our students online. And so strangely, it gives us some kind of space to actually talk about things more. And I just had a meeting this week where we were talking about how do we get a more diverse population into our programs, both the education programs and the school library teacher education programs. So I can't give you concrete things. I will say that before I came to Simmons, I was at another school where we did work on this with a grant from the federal government to pay tuition for for a certain number of minority students. And that was great for the couple of years that those students were in the pool, and they went out and became school librarians. This was in New York State. But the problem with all grants is that you need to have money to back it up, to follow up on that. continuously, and that seems to be the problem. And finally, a path to certification for library aides. Deborah and I were hard at work on in discussions with the two of us, and as well as the director of the School of Library and Information Science, and then COVID hit, and so we've kind of come to a dead stop. But I think that's something that we plan to take up again and talk about more. We've certainly had a productive partnership over the years with, as Deborah said, many of my students going into the public schools in Boston, either as teacher candidates, but also in their pre-practicum work. And some of them have been hired by you, thankfully. So I hope that Simmons will continue to have a really strong relationship with BPS in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kimball. Dr. Caselius?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Kimball, for your passion and your love of literacy and of libraries. And they are certainly a hub of the whole entire community. And I truly value our libraries. And I want to thank Deb for her leadership as well with our libraries. I'm going to turn it over now to Neva Coakley-Grice. She is a longtime public servant within our community, well known with Boston Police Department, and she has years and years and years of experience working with our youth, and we were able to get her over to our side of the house here in the Boston Public Schools this past June, and she hit the ground running this summer, has done so much incredible work already within the community, just a superstar. I was at the Lee School today and was able to see officers there who were helping to hand out food to our community, as well as over at Tech Boston, where they were welcoming everybody in the building and making sure everyone was safe. So they're around and they're keeping us safe and engaging with our community in a very unique and different way than previously. And I'm excited for her to talk about some of the reforms that she's been doing and some of the outreach she's been doing, as well as our data privacy policy that Sam DePina will be speaking of. And I think Kim is going to talk a little bit about some of the prevention work as well. So I'm going to turn it over to the team.
Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you so much, Dr. Consilius. I'm honored to be here as always. Thank you to all of the city councilors. And this is always wonderful to see you and your little puppy. And good to see everyone here happy and safe. First, I'd like to say we at Safety Services, particularly my officers, are partners. We will work diligently to break down barriers by building relationships, and in some cases, reestablish communications with students, community members, and community-based partners in an effort really to create prevention practices. We will reorganize from a law enforcement department to one which promotes health, wellness, prevention, partnership, and problem solving. As change agents, we will decentralize the decision-making process by really empowering officers who are organized on the ground level in regional teams to work with families, school personnel, community partners. Officers will leverage their connections to build consensus around creative solutions to barriers to student success, positive school environments, and the larger quality of life and health and safety of the broader school community. I have a slide here. Can we pull the slide up? In doing this, as the superintendent mentioned, I came in really like a ball of fire, really kind of engaging some of the same partners and relationships that I left with Boston PD. So first of all, okay, good move. I'll just go through the slide real quickly, and then we can be prepared to ask any questions at the end. Technically, we have engaged with over 200 stakeholders, school administrators. That includes our staff, our community partners, and students throughout BPS. We're formulating a department strategic plan based on our community engagement. And with that plan, it draws on a broad range of resources, including our racial equity planning tool, the Boston School Committee, the Boston School City Council, Boston Police Department, BPS professional development planning teams, our student data policy, and our police reform policy bill. We ensure a safe food distribution sites, our school time arrival, class transitions, and dismissals. Right now, we are in 28 food sites and 1 extra food sites 7 days a week. Where they're supporting, making sure everyone can come in and be safe, retrieving their meals while we're on a hybrid model. And as the superintendent mentioned, my officers are really going above and beyond, making sure that individuals feel safe while they're there within our communities. It's getting dark sooner now, making sure that our families are coming in and receiving their meals. We've assisted facilities in distributing 4,000 pieces of PPE equipment to over 120 schools to make sure all of our schools and our staff, administrators, while they're in the building responding during our hybrid model, making sure that they had all their equipment. Collaborating with citywide youth groups, we collected over 2,000 toys from Marine Toys with Tots program for the holiday. We collaborate with the youth group, and we're assisting them in distributing those toys within the next couple of weeks, really thinking out of the box, really being innovative and supporting our communities. Recommended update uniform designs based on engagement, personality, and effectiveness of our safety service mission. We're really looking at, my mother used to say, you can't really change unless you make a difference, unless you do something different. That's one of the things we're looking at, really be a different type of engagement officer, and with that's going to come a new uniform appearance. We're fostering departmental-wide MPTC basic reserve training, looking at getting our whole department reserve trained, which is looking at the new reform policy related to police. Recognized in 4,000 social media hits and virtual events. We have been really doing a circuit, really getting our word out, introducing myself in the really the re-engagement of our department and being a different type of department, really focusing on, our values, which include, providing a safe learning environment in our city schools, contributing valuable resources to schools and staff members, really fostering positive relationships with our youth, developing strategies to resolve problems affecting youth, and protecting our students as they reach their full potential. Not really ignoring any of the sentiment that's out there related to police, but really just making us work extra hard and extra dedicated for our young people and our staff in the schools. Sam, we can go on to the policy reform, which is a very important aspect of our transformation.
Thank you, Chief Coakley-Rice, and thank you for all your hard work you've been doing. Just want to publicly recognize that. So thank you very much for all the work you've done.
Thank you for your support.
So I'm here. Good evening, City Council members and committee at large. I'm here to speak with you all about our recent policy regarding preparing and sharing student incident reports and information with Boston Police. Before I jump in, I just want to make sure I also publicly thank all of our partners that work with us very closely to discuss and have a lot of good conversation around kind of the shaping of this policy. And also publicly recognize Dr. Caselli for our hard work and personal involvement in getting the group of us together to come up with this revised policy that we have today. So with that, just want to talk a little bit about the highlights of the policy. The policy restricts the use of internal safety service reports, so the names of the reports that we've used internally. We had well over 120 different types of incidents by which our school police officers could write reports, but we reduced that down to 4, which are sick assist, medical emergencies, missing students, and incidents that don't really involve students like, graffiti or vandalism and that kind of thing. Next, the policy restricts the type of student conduct for which safety services employee may prepare and file a BPD 1-1 report. Incident reports may never, and I repeat, never contain information about students, including immigration status, citizenship, national origin, ethnicity, native or spoken language, and suspected gang affiliation. So we're prohibiting any practice of any of that information being in any of our reports. It eliminates the practice of preparing intelligent reports as well, which are just basic information about different things that go on in the community. safety service employee must also now inform a school administrator prior to preparing an incident report where it involves a student. And then once the administrator is made aware that a student is going to have a police report filed or a report filed, they're required to notify the families of that as soon as they get that information within 24 hours. This policy also calls for a monthly meeting with the superintendent to review safety services data. In addition to the creation of a school safety working group that will meet with the superintendent and her team regularly to review data and make recommendations to further enhance the policy and implementation of the policy. It also calls for an annual review of the policy. Basically, that's just another opportunity for us to assess kind of where we've been and make any additional further changes that we feel is appropriate. And lastly, regarding the policy, I would just note that it requires annual training for not only the school safety service employees, but also the school administrators and any new staff upon their hire. What's important to note about the policy is that only the chief and deputy chief of safety services may share incident reports or other information with Boston Police, and that will be done through the Boston Police liaison. And the only exception to this requirement is that in the event of a health or safety emergency, it warrants safety service employees can share otherwise protected information externally. So that's pretty much the update there. And I will now pass it over to Kim Pellicho, our Executive Director of Safety Services.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate that. Thanks to the council for having us today and all my colleagues and superintendent. So I'm going to focus on some of the prevention, intervention, student support work that you asked us to discuss. So as far as safety services goes in collaboration with multiple internal departments, including the behavioral health services for BPS and our external partners, one of the things I wanted to highlight is this more pronounced daily communication on violent and traumatic incidents in the community. For instance, anytime we have a student that's directly impacted by a violent event, or we have multiple families in a certain area impacted by a large event, we're doing consistent communication and collaboration with those partners and the school-based staff. That results in direct outreach to impacted students and families, and the coordination of resources to those students and families. I'm happy to talk a little bit more about the intricacies of that process, but this is something that goes on daily with very deliberate meetings during the week with all of those partners, not only to do outreach for those families, but to also talk about the young people that require additional services within BPS in our community. As far as student support direct services, and this comes from our Senior Director of Behavioral Health, Andrea Amador. I should also acknowledge Jillian Kelton from Safety Services on our team and Rick Rainey as a part of this really direct service team. This is behavioral health services data from September to October. And notably, this is a lot of student support services. This is indicative of the level of trauma. And we know that since March, when COVID hit, particularly in that month and beyond, there's been a significant uptick between 20 and 30% in violence in the community, including juvenile violence. So that's significant. I should also point out within this framework this summer, when we were having multiple incidents and students impacted, I went to the superintendent and she immediately funded 4 more social workers for the summer to provide support directly to families. And they made hundreds of calls to families impacted as a result of the work that the team is doing in collaboration with the community. And those calls were all very well received. Those calls continue depending on what is the circumstances in any significant event in the community, and the response from families has been very, very positive. In addition, we are working with Boston Police Department. Safety Services partners with Boston Police Department, and we shift gears on the training component for a moment to provide active shooter and internal threat presentations. BPD is poised to work with us in providing these during this remote environment. So we just spoke with Sergeant Blake, and we'll be working with Chief Coakley and our team to initiate those for PD for our school communities. And if folks don't know, these are also very well received across the district by staff and school communities. They are for staff. They include situational awareness and how to really negotiate their own space in their own building. So normally they take place in the building for a reason, but we'll be working to do those virtually until we get fully back in. And finally, we work with Jody LG over at Succeed Boston. There's a little bit of data on what has been provided around bullying and cyberbullying through Succeed Boston and virtual trainings thus far this year. I am now going to turn it back over to Sam DePina. He's going to review the door lock replacement project of the district.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you and the rest of your team for all the hard work you do and the prevention efforts as well. Appreciate that. So one of the things we wanted to kind of give an update on is our door lock replacement. As you all know, over the years, unfortunately, with the various school shootings since Columbine, it's been real concerning to us and how we increase our safety measures at the schools. And one of the things that we engaged in was a door lock replacement project. As teachers, and we've noted concerns around doors not being able to lock in the events of emergency. So we're happy to report that we began this project in March of 2019. And as of October 31st, 2020, we've replaced complete locks in all classrooms in 95 of our buildings. In our North Zone, 31 buildings, in our East Zone, 36 buildings, in our West Zone, 28 buildings. We anticipate completion of all the remaining buildings by the end of the 2021 summer break. In many locations, other work was required to ensure that doors closed properly and locked as well. This, includes work such as replacing doors, installing new hinges, installing or replacing closers, or refurbishing metal door frames to help doors sit more appropriately in the space. We also purchased new keys for each school and completed complete key replacements for either lost keys or keys not returned by departing staff members. So this year we spent approximately about initial budget little over $5 million, and we continue to move forward with making these investments to ensuring that classrooms are safe, for our staff and our students. And with that, I will turn it back over to the superintendent.
Thank you, Sam. And did you mention our door stops that were made by Madison Park students?
No, I did not. You want to let them know? I apologize.
So with COVID, we were able to rally all of the Madison Park students over at Madison Park Vocational High School, where they put together 10,000 wooden door stops, and then we were able to get those delivered so that we could have our rooms nicely ventilated and with the doors propped open.
Thanks, Superintendent. I forgot about that.
All right, well, that's my team. They just did a superb job. I'm going to turn it over to Brian McLaughlin, who is going to be speaking about Build BPS and some of our major projects. As I said, we are not ready to talk about all of the pieces and components of Build BPS because we still have community engagement projects we're doing with the Horseman. We have community engagement projects that we're doing with Jackson Man, and then our K-6 expansion. And so we'll come back around and talk with all of you on those projects once we have more updates for you. So I'm going to turn it over to Brian to talk about the parts that are our biggest capital projects, as well as some of the exciting new renovations around water and windows and some other COVID response. So Brian.
Thank you, Superintendent, Sam, Councilor Sabi George, and other councilors on the hearing tonight, this evening. Kerry, I have a slide deck. If you could put it up, that would be great. Thank you. As Superintendent indicated, I'll be providing information on some of the larger projects currently in design and construction, along with some of the other capital programs BPS is managing within school buildings. The first slide is an overview of the three largest projects we currently have going on in design and in construction. The first would be the Boston Arts Academy project, which is currently in construction right behind Fenway Park. The new facility is designed to accommodate 500 students in grades 9 to 12 in academics in 5 art majors: theater, dance, music, design, visual communications, and fashion technology. The new building will have a 500-seat auditorium, a 200-seat black box theater, 4 new dance studios, multiple visual art studios, a recording studio, choral room, 150-seat recital room, and a roof terrace designed for use as an outdoor classroom and performance space. The Josiah Quincy Upper School is currently in design. That's the rendering on the bottom right-hand corner of the slide. Excitingly, after nearly a decade working with the MSBA, the city will be moving forward with the construction of the new Josiah Quincy Upper School on the site of their current modular building. The JQUS is a 6 to 12 middle high school that offers an international baccalaureate program, which requires a full range of academic, social, cultural, and physical education programs. MSBA approved the project scope and budget of this project by a unanimous vote on October 28th, and we'll be back before the council next Tuesday to discuss this project further and to request an appropriation to support the costs to construct a new building. Construction of this building will start in the summer of 2021 and will be complete for the 2024 school year. The new JQUS will be a 6-story middle high school built for 650 students in grades 6 to 12. The design of the building will emphasize flexibility, collegiality, and collaboration amongst the student and staff. The new state-of-the-art school will have 21st century learning spaces for music, art, science. It will have a full-size gymnasium, auditorium, media center, and cafeteria. In addition, there will be outdoor rooftop learning space that will include photovoltaics, native plantings, and the introduction of a school garden that will promote active learning about the environment. Finally, and last but not least, out of the three big, larger construction projects we have going on right now is the Carter School. That's still in the early stages of design. The Carter School, I know many people are familiar with, is a BPS school located on the border of Boston's Lower Roxbury South End neighborhood. The current building was built in the 1970s as a temporary facility for the school. Students at the Carter range in ages from 12 to 22. The students present both severe, intensive disabilities and complex health needs. Due to these unique challenges, each classroom is comprised of 5 students, 1 teacher, and 2 teaching assistants. Again, the project is in the early stage of design. The new school will be designed to double the student population. Expansion of the program to serve, this will also include the expansion of the program to serve students starting at the age of 3, whereas now they start at the age of 12. The new building will not be a typical school, but have features similar to a healthcare facility. The design of the new school will include flexible spaces, wide hallways, music therapy rooms, appropriate physical education space, a therapeutic pool, which is a very important need for a lot of the students that attend the Carter School. And it will also feature many conference rooms for meeting with families and staff, which are extremely important for this school's student population. In addition, outdoor therapeutic spaces will be included in the project to replicate the Carter School's current therapy garden. Moving on to some of the smaller projects we have ongoing right now. As you may have heard, if you could move to the next slide, Carrie. Boston Public Schools recently received a $6.2 million grant under the U.S.'s EPA Reduction in Lead Exposure Drinking Water Program. This grant is matched by the mayor's capital investment of $10.3 million and will be used to install and test 1,400 filtered bottle refill stations across the 87 BPS buildings that use bottled water as their sole source of drinking water. The project has 2 major components. Installation of new fixtures will be the first project component. The second component is the ongoing testing and maintenance of these fixtures. The capital investment includes the addition of a project manager who will be dedicated to overseeing the installation of the new fixtures and testing and monitoring to ensure the filling stations are working correctly and providing safe water for staff and students. BPS Capital is also overseeing the My Way Cafe program, which would be on the next slide. This is the 3rd year of construction and implementation of the My Way Cafe program across the district. My Way Cafe presents a dramatic shift from schools serving prepackaged meals. The transformative model of food services comes to us through the support of the City of Boston capital budget and the Shaw Family Foundation. It presents a dramatic shift for schools that have previously served prepackaged meals to their students. In these schools, the kitchens are transformed into miniature full-service cafeterias with serving lines, high-quality food, and most importantly, a new element for the students where they have the choice to select the food that they'll be eating for the day. To date, 90 plus school kitchens have been transformed to support My Way Cafe. Costs associated with the past 3 years of work on these renovations is over $18 million. The final phase of My Way Cafe is beginning design, and the remaining 25 to 30 schools will be in construction this upcoming summer. Final program I'm going to be speaking to some bathroom upgrades that are ongoing throughout BPS. In FY21, $10 million was included in the budget to identify and update bathrooms throughout the district. These upgrades focus on updating fixtures, partitions, lighting, painting, and flooring in some of the bathrooms that were in need of some work. The first phase of this program started this past summer with 6 schools currently in construction. That results in upgrades to 28 total bathrooms. Those schools, the Boston Teacher Union School, Ellis, Higginson-Lewis, Hurley, Philbrook, and Winthrop. And that's roughly $980,000 worth of work. The second phase, which will result in upgrades to an additional 86 toilet rooms, will go into construction in early winter. Those schools would be the Josiah Quincy Elementary School, Harvard Kent, Excel High School, Umana, and English High School. We also anticipate another 5 to 8 schools going into construction in the summer of 2021. I believe I'm going to turn it back over to Sam for some COVID updates.
Yes, thank you very much, Brian, for all your leadership and work and all those efforts. Those are real significant investments that we're making with your leadership and help, and with the help of our city colleagues. I also want to acknowledge our city colleagues who've been supporting with the work as well. I'm here just briefly to discuss some of the COVID preparations and planning that we have been engaged in since the spring. And, you know, those projects include windows. We had 2 phases of window projects that we completed. The first phase was to ensure that at least one operable window was open in every classroom. Even though we have an average about 3 to 4 windows per room, we wanted to make sure all of them were operable as much as possible. We identified about 300 windows that need to be repaired in phase 1, and we got that work done first. And while we were doing that, we assessed every window in every school, which was about 27,500 windows. And of those 27,500 windows, we identified 7,000 that needed additional repair. That work has been ongoing is in the final phases of completion at this stage. We've also been actively working with our HVAC systems. We have already started the process of purchasing and installing some of our MERV 13 filters in buildings that will accommodate the filters. Right now, they're still on back order due to supply chain issues across the country, as a lot of school districts are, looking for them and trying to install them in their buildings. So once we get them, we'll be placing them in buildings in school systems where they will fit. We've already identified which schools those are. We're also in the process of, as the temperatures are getting colder, we're monitoring our energy division is monitoring the temperatures in our buildings. We're running 3 reports on the average temperatures 3 times a day at 7 a.m., 11 a.m., and 3 p.m. And our school leaders have the ability to contact our energy division to raise the temperatures up or down as they see fit. So that's just an update there. And with this non-HVAC schools, we continue to monitor and make repairs as needed to our ventilation systems and boilers. Just notably, we just replaced got a brand new boiler over at the Bada school that just completed recently as well. So we're really excited about that. So we're doing ongoing work and ongoing repairs in our non-HVAC system schools as well. With air quality, we're moving forward with making a large purchase of data loggers for all the classrooms that will monitor live indoor air quality matrix of carbon monoxide, carbon monoxide, volatile organic compounds, dust, and temperatures. That way our environmental division can centrally monitor some of the air quality live and have that live information with the process of securing that piece of data for us as well. And we're moving forward with the purchasing of Delos IntelliPure air purifiers for all classrooms. These units are more efficient than the HEPA filters. We did an analysis of different types of purifiers, and this is the one we landed at. The Delos features patented technology that is capable of trapping and removing particles as small as 0.005 microns at 99.99% efficiency, which is smaller than the COVID virus particles, whereas HEPA filters are only 99.97% efficient, and their filters capture only 0.3 microns worth of particles. And again, BPS completed air quality testing of all of our schools over the summer, and all of them were rated as passed, and our air quality is safe to occupy. So right now we're just, utilizing additional safety measures just out of precaution, but, we're confident in saying that our air is safe and our buildings are safe to be in. So with that, I will turn it back over to the superintendent.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you, Brian, for that presentation. You can also find our air quality reports for every single school and inspections on www.bostonpublicschools.org/reopening, and under there you look under facilities, I think it is. But yeah, we could share that with all of you here so that you can see it and see the reports for each of our schools. And it is a room by room report for the air quality. We're going to continue to do the air quality testing. Matter of fact, at the 4 sites will be opening this Monday. We're doing some new testing that has been endorsed by Harvard Law School, or not law school, the Harvard School, and their studies around air quality. And so we're looking forward to those results and using that also as a measure for ongoing air quality within our schools, especially as the weather gets a little bit colder here. So with that, why don't I turn that over to you, Madam Chair, and you can ask us our questions. I'll take the easy ones and give the hard ones to my team.
I love it. And they're more than qualified to answer them, I'm certain. Thank you, Dr. Cassellius and everyone for that thorough presentation. I'd like to get right into questions by colleagues. So we will start with Councillor Braden, and I am doing a 5-minute timer this evening. So as you hear the alarm, please wind up your questions so that we can keep this moving. We do have another panel this evening. Thank you, Councillor Braden.
Thank you. Thank you for a very comprehensive report. Actually, there's a lot to digest here. I'd really value I'm very interested in the school libraries, and I'm curious about all those figures. I'd love to see if you could share the slide deck, that would be really helpful. So I'm curious about the partnership with the BPS. I know that our local libraries do after school homework assistance for students, but what is happening now at this moment during COVID? I know this is a weird throw the wrench in the work sort of thing that COVID's doing, but what sort of services are the libraries offering to students who are working remotely at this time? Since most of our libraries here are for pickup only, you can't actually go into the building. So what's happening on the ground there?
Would you like me to?
Yeah,
if you can, that'd be good.
Oh, yeah. Well, I didn't know if Dr. Cassellius would like to or
yes,
not.
Absolutely.
As mentioned briefly, and I can describe it a little better, BPL has enabled access for all students to access very easily this ebook platform called Sora that has thousands and thousands of digital text for kids to read. So that's a way for all students very seamlessly to access books they need for school, for pleasure, and so on. So that is, all of those resources are digital, if you will. So that's where BPL was very generous in allowing BPS to partner with this company rather than having BPS take out its own subscription.
Mm-hmm. That's very good. And Sora, P-S-O-R-A or S-O-R-A?
It's S-O-R-A.
S-O-R-A, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And how many, do you know how many students are availing of that service?
Not off the top of my head. I am pretty confident that probably about 80% of the school library team members are using it with their schools. So I can probably assume a rough estimate of 20 to 30,000 students have probably accessed it in some form.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And then the path to certification for library aides. I understand that, you know, the barriers for going into further education with to get a master's in library studies or whatever is a barrier. The tuition fees are a barrier. I'm curious about the strategies for getting more library aides certified. How does that work? And also on how that works in terms of diversifying your librarian staff.
Melanie, do you want to speak to that?
How does it work
Beautiful.
is the question. I think that's the piece that Deborah and I didn't get a chance to really talk about. And we want to, but we're sort of stymied by COVID. In terms of how it's going to help with diversity, it depends, I suppose, on how diverse your library aides are. If the point is to provide a path to certification for library aides that are currently working at BPS, it just depends on who those folks are. In terms of diversity in general, that's definitely been made pretty clear as a mandate. DESE, we just recently were reaccredited by DESE and have a continuing accreditation by DESE, and that was, is made very clear to us that that's something that they're very concerned about. We've been having ongoing discussion with all of the educator programs across the state with strategies for how to do that. But so I can't give you specifics right this minute, but to say that it's important is probably an understatement.
Yeah, I think it's a very laudable goal to have, and also in terms of our cultural diversity. I'm wondering about library resources that are bilingual. I see little ones starting off with a bilingual first reader, so that the mom or caretaker, who maybe English is not their first language, so that it's sort of a win-win all round. So you have access to bilingual materials as well.
Yeah, bilingual materials. Interestingly enough, graphic novels are very useful for ESL students. Most of our librarians now have ESL training as well, in SEI training and so on. So
very good.
Am
I running out of time, Madam Chair?
We're over time.
Oh, all right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And please stick around. We will do a second round, but you can also submit your questions directly and we'll make sure to get answers for them. Next, we'll have Councillor Arroyo, and following Councillor Arroyo, Councillor O'Malley. Councillor Arroyo, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm going to try and stagger these by topics that were brought up. And so, hold on. I told you, they wait till I start talking. In terms of our libraries, how are we handling, in a time when all of our students are remote, but even when we get back to a hybrid model, most of our students will still be remote. How are we handling book distribution or making books available to our families?
Well, there are numerous ways to approach this. There is a protocol in place for when students are back in schools that they can take out books, and then there's from the American Library Association a way to sanitize the books so that we can begin to have kids have them, go home with them and enjoy them and use them. So there's that avenue. One thing that I'm pretty excited about, and this is very nascent, and I may be talking out of school, if you will, but now that the food sites are pretty well established at Mildred Ave, which is a food site, the school library paraprofessional and I are looking into just giving books away. They just actually had a book fair where they gave books to families that came to pick up meals and food. And so at the Campbell Resource Center, we have a wealth of donated books, and we're hoping to begin to get those distributed to the district so that families have their own libraries. So we're excited about that. And if it pilots well at Mildred, then maybe we can have it continue across the city. So there's that fashion. I know that some schools, when COVID all of a sudden hit us, librarians sent a wealth of books home with kids that week in March when we all were sort of scrambling. And so the students had those to enjoy. And hopefully they'll come back and we'll be able to, as I said, continue to put books in kids' hands.
Thank you. As you can tell by my background, books are very important, but they didn't become very important when I was
a few bookcases.
That was established when I was at BPS. And so I just want to make sure that we're creating that kind of culture, even as we do this remotely. For Build BPS, I'm going to transition to Build BPS now, and then I'll use my second round to talk about school safety and the new immigration policy, just to give everybody a heads up on what's coming next. In terms of the window project, I believe the number was 7,000 windows. Is that what I heard?
Yes.
I remember having a hearing in August about reopening schools with the superintendent here. And I believe the number of windows that were reported at that time was about 116 or in that ballpark. Why the huge discrepancy between what was reported in August and this 7,000 that's being reported right now?
I'm not sure why, how that was communicated exactly, but the issue that occurred was that we were doing the work in two phases. So the first phase was identifying all the spaces where there was not at least one window operable, and that was the first phase of the work. And at the time, we were probably only up to 116 windows. But when we finished that assessment, it wound up being in total 300 windows. But simultaneously, as we were doing all the assessments, we knew we had identified more that were not operable that we wanted to make operable. So there were two phases of the work. So that might have been some of the confusion. They're two different numbers. They shouldn't be looked at together. They should be looked at one phase. We're just making one window operable in every classroom to make sure that was happening. Then the second phase of the work was identifying all the windows that were not operable that we wanted to make repairs to. And again, there were on average about 3 to 4 windows per classroom. So we were confident that there was enough windows in buildings to make sure there was air exchanges.
Okay, so just to make sure that I understand it, basically that initial number in August those were classrooms that had no windows that worked at all. Is that basically what it was?
Exactly.
Okay. And then this is an entire assessment of even possibly not even classrooms, but offices and everything else, all the windows in a building.
Yes.
Got it. As we look at kind of things that are obviously these aren't new issues, these are current concerns, but when we talk about HVAC in a lot of these buildings, is Build BPS doing anything to kind of streamline or push towards getting these things moving faster in the buildings that are currently not entirely where we want them to be?
That is definitely something we're considering. And we're looking at real carefully as we assess all of our buildings and all of our ventilation systems. And I know that's a big kind of area of concern given the pandemic. So we are looking very closely at that, yes.
And then just finally, before I go into my second round, because I see the timer, this is my last question. Is there any way to get Build BPS to do a dashboard or yearly reports or something? Because other than the 2019 updates, we just have the 2018 report. Is there a plan for another report or some kind of way for us to have a dashboard so families and counselors can monitor it?
Yeah, I'll turn over to Nathan Cooter, who has taken over Build BPS, and he works closely with Sam and the ops team, as well as Brian, on some of the major projects and some of our transparency around Build BPS when we restarted. As you know, when we were going in COVID, we kind of put things on the back end burner so we could get all ready for reopening. So I'll let Nate talk a little bit about where we're at with Build BPS and where we're going to be headed.
Yeah, and I appreciate the question. When we launched Build BPS, the first report, we launched it with a dashboard that allowed you to go to each school community and click and see a lot of information, including the condition of air quality. There's a lot of information about what physical assets are in the building. We have not done a good job of keeping that data live and updated with major projects that have happened. So one of the things that Brian and I are going to be working on with the Build BPS team over the next year is refreshing that data and figuring out an annual timeline for making sure that you have that so that you can go in and view that dashboard and get the latest information. Certainly, a lot of the work we've done around the windows is not reflected in that data, but it's something that we're committed to keeping updated going forward.
Thank you, and I'll wait till the second round. Thank you so much for letting me get that last question in.
Thank you, Councilor Arroyo. Councilor O'Malley, and then we'll be followed by Councilor Campbell. Councilor O'Malley?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I apologize, I was a little tardy to this, having some technical difficulties. I'm now talking to you through my phone, but delighted to be with all of you and really appreciate the partnership of the chair in so much of this important work. Just ticking through, I know we're discussing, if I have it right, Chair, we're going through all three sort of topics: Build BPS, Safety, Security, Library. So I'm going to work backwards then from the numerical docket listings. Obviously, as a bibliophile, as someone who loves books and loves BPS, really encouraged to see our renewed support for libraries and library staff. It is obviously such a integral part of the learning process. When I was a student at Boston Latin School in the late 1990s, we nearly lost accreditation because of a subpar library. Many people may not know that now, but that was something that what is now the CVAC room was the library. So it's great to see how that has been rectified, and looking forward to seeing that replicated throughout every school, particularly our high schools. It's important to have such strong libraries and fully staffed libraries. Secondly, the safety and security now takes two chilling reasons that we need to focus on. Of course, school safety in terms of a man-made issue, but now we're seeing with the pandemic as well. And I know that there've been some good work there, and look forward to continuing the work. For this round, I want to focus on the general Build BPS hearing. I think some of you may know, I've mentioned this countless times through countless iterations of the Boston City Council, that the first hearing order I ever called for was on a facilities plan for Boston Public Schools. This is in March of 2011. So this is something that obviously I'm focused on, and it's the work remains daunting, and given the economy, it looks like it will continue to be daunting. But I wanted to speak specifically on, as it relates to new construction, BPS's plans to live up to our work in terms of net zero carbon construction. This is something that we passed, I've been working on since 2016. The mayor signed into law an executive order last December mandating that all new school and all new municipal buildings will be net zero carbon. So Supp or Nate or whomever wants to tackle that, can you talk a little bit about sort of our resiliency plans and as it relates to new construction and eventually retrofitting as well?
That would be Brian or Nate talking about the energy efficiency. Brian, you want to take a shot at that?
Sure. How you doing, Councilor? Thank you for the question.
Brian. Of course.
As with the new construction projects that we have ongoing in design, we're working closely with the design teams to identify how we get to a neutral building relative to the energy management. Working closely with, currently right now we have HMFH on the Josiah Quincy Upper School project, Perkins and Eastman. They were the architects for the Boston Arts Academy, which is going to be online after your motion was passed, but also working with the Carter School. We also have a environmental team here at the Boston Public Schools that's working closely with these architects to not only work on these current buildings, but identify how we can make strides in our existing buildings so that we do have the most energy efficient facilities in the city of Boston or in the inventory.
Sure. So just to be clear, so BAA will not be net zero carbon?
No, I believe it's going to be certified LEED Gold at least. In it, okay. We're going to try to. I have to confirm this, but it might be. There might be the potential to add infrastructure within the building to support a net zero building down the line if we're able to get there.
Yeah. Will it have any PV infrastructure on the roof, for example?
I believe there is a small PV array on that building. I know the Carter is planning on a PV array along with the Josiah Quincy Upper School.
That's great. So and I'm not trying to trip you up here. I recognize the BAA one happened, before this. So, but I think, having it, if not net for the older new construction, pardon the oxymoron, to have something that's net zero ready as opposed to net zero carbon certified. And it sounds like BAA, it sounds like you're moving in that direction. Is that the same for the Carter and the Upper Quincy, or will either of them be NZC?
No, the Carter would definitely design started after your motion of the matter was
Yep.
carried through the council. JQUS, again, they started design prior, but I believe it's going to be net ready. Maybe not zero when it becomes online, but we're going to, again, put the infrastructure in place to hopefully get there.
Well, that's really encouraging, and would love to obviously, for my own edification, stay in touch with you on that, and look forward to seeing it. I often cite this example. In Lexington, Massachusetts, we had a selectman speak at our hearing on this. They have the Hastings Elementary School, which is net zero carbon, one of the first schools in the Commonwealth, if not the first. Now, admittedly, Lexington is a lot different than Boston. I'm not suggesting we have anywhere near the level of space, but the point remains the same. The Hastings school generates an extra 200,000 kilowatt hours of electricity every year that goes back to the town. So that's actually a net positive carbon. So the bar has been set pretty high, but it again shows my belief that every fiscal conservative ought to be an environmentalist, because if we do this right, we're going to have better energy efficient buildings, and we're also going to save money for the taxpayers. So thank you for your work in this space. I know it's not glamorous, but it's incredibly important, and I'm grateful for your leadership here.
Thank you, Councillor O'Malley. We have
Thank you.
Councillor Campbell, then Councillor Flynn. Councillor Campbell? Councillor Campbell? We'll then go to Councillor Flynn. Councillor Flynn, welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Sabi.
Go ahead, Councillor Flynn. I can go after you. Technical difficulties. Go right ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Campbell. Thank you, Councillor Sabi George. Thank you, Superintendent, for being with us. And thank you to all the other professionals that are here as well. Thank you, Chief Coakley, and I know you're off to a great start. I know you did a lot of work in South Boston as a police officer, and we have a lot of respect for you and for your professionalism as well. I just want to ask Brian if you can maybe highlight a little bit Build BPS. What is the relationship between Build BPS, the schools, and with some of the programming with BCYF as well? How does that relationship work if we're doing Build BPS and also there's some projects that need to be done at a BCYF center that might be on site? Can you talk about that relationship?
Sure. I think with all school facilities within BPS, and in speaking specifically to the Build BPS program, we look at that facility as a whole, and several of these facilities include BCYF centers, whether it's the Murphy, Jackson Man, or any of the other schools that have BCYF centers within those facilities. So in the event that we were going to be doing upgrades or somehow renovating or transforming a particular school in the space that BCYF incorporates, they'd be at the table while we work through whether it's design or future plans for that building, so that one, they know the impacts to the operations while a particular project is going on, but also have a better understanding of what their spaces are going to look like that may impact their programmatic offerings when a particular project is done. So I know we have a very close working relationship with BCYF because they have a fairly large footprint in a lot of our buildings, and I know we'll continue to partner with them because although they almost reside in our buildings, we actually benefit a lot from a lot of their programs that they offer to students and children throughout the city.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Brian. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry, Sam. Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, sorry. Just quickly, I would just add that I know Superintendent Caselius and Commissioner Morales were really instrumental on making sure we codified an MOU that spelled out all these working relationships as well. So that is in place, and we followed that to help us guide our work as well.
Thank you, Sam. And I think my final question is, I'm so happy to hear about the Carter School being recently provided funding, allocated funding for some of the renovations there, including the therapeutic swim therapeutic pool. I know that's going to be a tremendous service for our students, and they definitely deserve it. So I want to say thank you to the BPS team for working closely with the state treasurer's team in getting that done, as well as the mayor's team. I'm also happy about the Josiah Quincy School as well, as was discussed. I guess my question is, for a school like Josiah Quincy or other schools that might be located in areas where we have high pollution rates, environmental issues, what is BPS doing, looking throughout the system to identify schools that might be near highways, near bus terminals, near train stations? What are they doing to address those types of quality air issues or quality of life issues for students and teachers in and around difficult environmental issues?
I think, Counselor, it's a really good question, and probably Mr. Cooter and Mr. McLaughlin can speak to it more so. But earlier today, Mr. DePina talked about an indicator system that we're going to be putting into our schools, which will have a central base that all of the information about CO2 and dust and other things within the air can come back to our central environmental team, who is outstanding, by the way. They're just a great team of folks, and they'll then be able to more monitor their air quality.
Thank you, Superintendent, and thank you, Councilor Asabi George. No further questions. I can wait to the next round.
Thank you. Perfect timing. Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Councilor Campbell, and then Councilor Mejia. Councilor Campbell.
Thank you, Councilor Asabi George, and thank you to the panelists. And I apologize, I missed, I think, the beginning of the hearing. My questions, and maybe this, and I can look at, there was a lot of information presented, so I can definitely look at it when this is over. But, you know, obviously, we're still continue to get questions with respect to ventilation, the safety of our buildings with respect to the pandemic and returning. So just people are frustrated as well with respect to the fact that they've been raising concerns, of course, for a long time about the old infrastructure and concerns around ventilation, HVAC systems, et cetera, even before COVID. And I know you know the superintendent, when you even did your tour, you were very concerned about the physical infrastructure. So as we think about bringing students back eventually, particularly our highest need students, how do we prioritize buildings that we deem to be safer? And those buildings that are safer, what do they have that makes them safer in this moment in time? And then for the other infrastructure issues, what's our timeline and what's realistic, right? In terms of making them safer in the midst of the pandemic, as we, of course, continue to create a plan to bring our highest need students back.
Thank you, Councilor,
Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you for that. You know, it really helps to clear up some of the fear and anxiety that's out there. You know, our buildings are old, and we do have a lot of work to do over the next several years under the Build BPS and some of our capital improvement plans. Some of that we started with bathrooms and water and windows, but we have a lot more work with painting and flooring and new builds and gymnasiums and libraries and all the other things that we want to do. But the basic thing for what we're trying to do to secure safety within infectious disease is the air quality. And as you so rightfully said, there are three things major that we are doing within our schools. One is we have replacing the windows when the weather is good outside. We also have purchased air purifiers for our nursing stations, isolation rooms, and then all of the 4 schools that are open will have the air purifiers, and we have classroom air purifiers on order. Mr. DePina talked a little bit about our supply problem, but we have them on order, and we're ready to go with that. The third is what I just spoke about, which is the air indicators. The data indicators, I can't think of the data collection indicators, I think, that will go into our classrooms and give us a more regular reading of the air quality within our classrooms. So those are long-term investments that really aren't, don't cost millions and millions of dollars, but will provide for the ongoing maintenance and monitoring of our air quality within our buildings. And I think those pieces are what's going to be needed when we're dealing with infectious disease like this.
Thank you, Superintendent, and look forward to staying in contact. I know it's an ongoing issue and just wanting to raise up, and I know you guys are hearing it too, Aiden also is, I guess, frustrated about something, but also wanted to just continue to flag that there continues to be frustration, I think, with just the pace and of the Build BPS plan overall, and of course, improving our infrastructure in such a way that it is considered top tier. So just we'll continue to stay connected on that issue. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Get that.
Thank you, Councilor Campbell. Councilor Mejia.
Hi, yes, good evening. Thank you. So just in the interest of my 5 minutes, I want to just be super mindful of how I want this to look for me. I'm going to ask a question specifically around some data, first to the library, for the librarian hearing order. And then I'm going to give you some time to look up that data while I ask questions to another cohort of folks that I want to, so I don't want to like waste my time here. So I'm going to ask if you could just give me a breakdown of the number of librarians and librarian paraprofessionals by race. And I'm also curious to know how many librarians speak more than one language. So I'll come back to you while you get that data. And I'm going to move on to my next question to Chief Coakley. I'm just super inspired and excited to see the work that you're doing, and happy to know that you are really centering it in community. And I think that that's what these times require. So looking forward to your leadership in this space. I do have some follow-up questions from our previous hearing. I believe it was in August around our restorative justice. And so when we met, we talked about the need for surveying families in terms of how they were experiencing the presence of police. And I'm just curious, if you guys have put any reports out, what have you learned from that report? And where are we with that deliverable? And then the other question that I have for you in particular is that during another hearing that we hosted, we heard, I know that stabbings and issues of shootings are issues that happen in our schools, but we also heard in a hearing that we hosted on July 30th that sexual assault was a growing problem in our schools. And I'm just curious what your department is doing to address and prevent these incidences from happening. And then the last question that I have is in regards to information sharing. I believe I think this one is for you, Sam. You talked about a new information sharing policy. I'm just curious as to when that policy was created and who did you work with to create that policy? So I'm gonna go back to the librarian question so that I can give my other colleagues an opportunity to think about what I asked so that we can keep this moving, and I have 5 minutes to do so. So I'll go back to the librarians.
Well, I'm still doing a tally, so.
Okay, so I'll move on to the next. So who can answer? Who's ready to answer?
I can start, this Councilwoman. So during my time here, just my short 12 weeks, I have been, like you said, I've been really all around the community, not only just focusing on my experience from BPD, but really just trying to get a new lens on my position here. And doing that, I visited up to about 75 schools across 11 neighborhoods throughout Boston. I've also talked to about 200 stakeholders in community meetings, and that's a true number. And I know it's probably more than that if I really just go one by one. In that input, I received input from about 1,000 members in the Boston community. I remember before we talked, and we just haven't had the opportunity to follow up on that survey, but just after last week, I was just thinking that we should definitely do that. But prior to that, I've been talking to a lot of different individuals, and a lot of that input is encompassed into my strategic plan that we're finalizing. And some of those things, one, my new objectives as far as our engagement, really getting out in the community and doing some extra things, my dialogues. I've done my community meetings. I've done some of our engagement things. We participated in two kind of food distribution banks. We help with the PPE equipment. We've done, did you want to say something?
No. No, I heard, yes, no, I was actually, it was more specifically around the feedback and the survey, but that's great to hear. And I've seen you, I've seen you and your team out in these streets, doing the work, and I just also want to shout that out.
And some
But
of
I
the
was
comments from the Woke Woman Wednesday, I saw all the hits from that, and some of the questions that were also on the chat. So I've kind of took a tally of those questions and those comments, and really kind of acted on those. I'm not sure if you heard the earlier presentation, but we're looking at extensive training for our officers. We're looking at a new uniform that's going to be more conducive in the engagement practices that we're going to be doing moving forward. We're also looking at doing professional development for the officers. We've already, we're in the planning stages of doing the restorative justice practices with BSAC. Matter of fact, they just called me back last Friday, so we're working on doing that before the end of the year.
That's great. And before we, because now I'm always now paranoid when I attend these type of hearings, because I want to make sure I get through. If you could just tell me quickly, what have you heard in regards to sexual assault in Boston Public Schools? And if you could just, if you don't know much about if you haven't seen that as a growing problem yet, then that's fine. But I have heard in public hearings, and I just want to put that on your radar. You don't need to answer it. I just want to just put that on your radar as something.
So sexual assaults go directly to Boston Police.
Okay, great.
Any report of sexual assault goes directly to Boston Police. The sexual assault, they have two officers, two female officers that come out. We'll take the report. We don't even take those reports, and then those reports are followed up through sexual assault unit for Boston Police.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, my love.
We're out of time, Councilor Mejia. So if the other panelists could respond to Councilor Mejia's earlier questions, so we could move on.
I'm ready if it be very brief.
Docket, please, thank you.
The library team members, I mean, this is anecdotal. 3 Latinx, 1 Asian, and 9 Black library team members.
Librarians, they're librarians.
Well, they're either paraprofessionals or, I mean, I can do a further breakdown. The majority are paraprofessionals that I mentioned. We have 2 African-American certified librarians, 1 Latinx certified librarian, and the paras 9 or 8 now, I guess, or 7 Black paraprofessionals.
And okay, and the second part of that question was how many of them speak more than one language?
I'm making an assumption. I would say
so, Dr.
4 or 5 of them do fluently.
Instead of making an assumption, if you could submit that to us,
I will.
For the record, that'd be helpful. So we have that detailed, both the race, we'll add gender, race, gender, and then the language is spoken.
Okay, happy to do it.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. I've got a few questions, and then we'll certainly do another round for colleagues as they have additional questions. Deborah, since we have you and Melanie available, I do have a couple of questions around libraries. Is there, similar to school nurses or school social workers, school psychologists, there's sometimes a national standard, and I wonder if there is a national standard for whether or not a school should have a library or is suggested or mandated to have a library based on maybe the number of kids. I'm also curious, how much does the Boston Public Schools spend on library materials? Is it a flat budget, or is it an average per student allocation? And then also, Melanie, Dr. Kimball pointed to the correlation between achievement and testing scores as it relates to access to libraries. I wonder if we've looked into any of these, and I see that Dr. Kimball has left us, but perhaps you could maybe answer that. I believe that there's a direct correlation. She referenced some science with it.
I'll start with that first.
Right.
There's a strong body of research, 25 years, about access to a certified school library and effective school library program and academic success, writing scores, standardized test scores, writing, a wealth of different types of studies that do that correlation. I'm happy to send that as well. In regards to
per pupil
the
spending,
certification, the national standard, It's certainly by state. I've just done some research myself, state by state, in regards to school library teacher evaluation programs. So every state sort of handles certification elements to the being certified in a different fashion. It tends to be that you don't you need 24 hours more than when I say regular teacher, I don't mean it that way, but teacher just out of college to even step into a library to be a certified librarian. Simmons then offers the library degree as well. In regards to a national standard for books, that kind of thing, there are some guidelines. I mean, it's not like written in stone, but there are guidelines. And there really should be about 10 to 15 books per student in a school library, in a school, as that's a rough estimate. In regards that, we do have national school library standards that for evaluation purposes, as well as for student competencies and that sort of thing, information literacy and literature literacy and so on. So there are a set of standards that I'm happy to share as well. And then in regards to per capita spending, the Central Library Services budget funds my salary. It funds membership to the Metro Boston Library Network. That's the bulk of it. It funds integrated library networks for the smaller libraries that are not part of that MBLN system. And it pays for one digital ebook subscription for K-8 students. There is not a per capita expenditure for library books and resources. That's up to the individual school as to how school librarians or school library team members fund getting new resources for their building.
Great, thank you so much for that. And I'm gonna clip through a couple of my other questions on Chief Coakley. All of our students now have, or I think almost all of our students now have electronic devices, whether it's the Chromebook the BPS gave them, it's their own tablet or a cell phone device, things like that. Have we seen an increase in online, whether it's cyberbullying incidents of sexual exploitation, other sort of incidents of either violence or infringement or assault using technology, because every kid now is at home, more isolated, not in school, and access to technology?
Well, there has been, since I've been there, just in the short time I've been there, I've seen instances of inappropriate use of their Chrome devices. Young people are very astute as far as how to use technology and how to get around safety protocols. And what we're realizing is that some of our educators, in which we have gone around and really just re-educated them on setting their privacy settings. And that's kind of helped within the last few weeks. It's helped tremendously. Also, young people have had a couple of situations in which inappropriate things were displayed on the Zoom classes. We had the incident that they had nationally with Zoom, in which you could photobomb Zoom classes, but that was something that Zoom had nationally. But we have our computer, I forget but it's Mark Razine has been working very closely with us, and he's always on it. As soon as we recognize an incident, it's reported to us. We directly communicate with him, and he rectifies the situation right about. And if an incident has to be recorded, then we do that. There's been a couple of unfortunate incidences of sexual issues, and they're directly reported to Boston Police, as I mentioned earlier.
That's great. I know that CAC, and I know the superintendent supports these efforts, and the district attorney does around the stop, block, and talk around some of the exposures that our kids are having online. My last question maybe is for Nate, but it's something that we've talked about in hearings over the last almost 5 years now, or 4 years anyway, around the sort of the next batch of funding around Build BPS. Although there is this feeling and appreciation that some of the Build BPS planning has stalled because of COVID, and sort of it's distracted so many of us from so many different things. are there efforts underway around securing or realizing an additional allocation down the road for additional improvements to the BPS infrastructure?
Well, you know me, Madam Chair, I'm always one to not be shy about asking for more funding. I would like to actually see the Biden administration come out with a big infrastructure bill across the nation for schools, quite honestly. I think that it's needed, and I think that that's a huge barrier for us to opening schools safely across the nation. And so I think that there's a number of things that we need to do. And I also think that, you know, Mayor Walsh has made a significant commitment with Build BPS. I think he recognizes now with COVID that there is additional work to be done within our facilities. And we already had one meeting with him, and we'll have many other over the next several months as we begin to have these community conversations and restart the projects under Build BPS.
Thank you very much, Madam Superintendent. Okay, I'm going to go for another round of questions from colleagues. We'll start with Councilor Braden.
I think I might just follow up on Councillor Anissa Savvy-George's question about what's in the pipeline. I know that the Jackson Man complex is very much on your mind. It's very much on my mind and the folks in Alston, Brighton. In terms of supporting this process with regard to developing a plan for Build BPS for Jackson Man complex, which includes the BCYF Community Centre, the Horace Mann and the Jackson Elementary. What is the process? What are the next steps, and how can I be of help?
Well, you could be of great help, Counselor. Thank you for that and for offering your assistance. I know that Mr. McLaughlin and Mr. Cooter will be in touch with you. Any meetings that we have with the community right now, we're in the process of surveying the community. And we did a really great survey, had a lot of community engagement. As you know, you were part of much of that this past winter prior to COVID. And then when COVID did slow things down, and our focus was to reopening for most of our facility work. Now that we're getting that started again, we've had a meeting with the Horseman community and the Jackson Man community to begin to talk about their swing spaces so that we can get their projects on the dockets and designed and underway.
Very good. I look forward to partnering with you.
Thank you.
With you on that. It's a huge undertaking, and it's a really, really important project within our neighbourhood. So I'm happy to help in any way I can. Also, I'd love to know a little more from Chief Coakley about restorative justice. I'm fairly new to the whole concept, and I just wanted to know in terms of your staff development, how that's going with regard to training your staff in restorative justice techniques or programs.
Well, a lot of my staff have already been involved in restorative justice for a few years now. And me coming over from Boston, I've done about 4 or 5 different circles with different organizations. Some even considered, I did it even in Suffolk County House of Corrections with a group of youth there. I've done some with some juveniles coming out of DYS facilities. I've also done some with a lot of the community organizations, Girls Leaps, and a couple other programs, Big Sisters. But my officers have done them with different groups around the city as well. They've been trained in restorative justice practices. In fact, we have a group practice set up for right after the new year with BSAC, the group, the Mayor's Council group of youth. So we're going to be doing probably about a 6 or 7 session with them. But we're going to be doing some extensive training with them as well. So we have a partner in BPS, Arthur Collins, who is working with my group to do training coming up, like I said, before the new year. And then we'll be doing restorative justice circles with BSAC.
Very good. I think it's a great tool to help address a lot of the trauma. The other question I had for you is in relation to sexual assault. You know, a lot of it goes unreported, and there's a tremendous amount of shame and blame and all that goes with it. How is there? What mechanism is there for students to report an assault or in the school?
Well, there's a number of different mechanisms. Right now, we're getting reports directly from teachers. We're getting them from administrators. And as I mentioned earlier, those reports go directly to BPD, but BPD is a very close partner of ours. 2 young females come out, they take the reports, and BPD refers those incidents directly to their sexual assault unit. But based on our relationship, we keep in direct contact. Any other services from our behavioral health, we have one of our other partners on the line, Kim and Jillian, and our intervention and prevention section of safety services. They follow up on those calls and offer any services to individuals after the report and incidents is taking place.
And Chief, I would just add for the council, there's a full equity protocol that all of our school leaders and staff follow with regards to any report of alleged sexual misconduct. Within that protocol is to contact safety services. We use Children's Advocacy Center extensively, particularly young people 12 and under. And so there's a lot of work that's done. And BSP, Neva would add this, they don't do any investigations around that. Any investigation that needs to be done is handled by BPD if necessary.
So also in terms of prevention and teaching good behavior and respect for boundaries, etc., that's part of your ongoing support, I assume, as well.
Yeah, they have a curriculum for that in health and wellness. We can happy to revisit that with you at another time and provide that information, particularly in the elementary and middle school levels.
Very good. I assume I've used my time, Madam Chair, so thank you all for your answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braden. Councillor Arroyo and then Councillor O'Malley. Councillor Arroyo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And now for the second part of this questioning, and I do have questions about Build BPS and librarians, but in honor of the time restraints that we have here, while I have you all here, I just do want to say directly that I believe I count 7 of you here today. 2 days ago, we had a hearing directly on point about surveillance oversight at BPS. We had none of you here, and I am incredibly disappointed that we did not have you here to have that conversation. I made comments to that effect on Tuesday, and I wanted to make sure that I made them here while you were here to hear them. And on top of that, I'm going to now jump right into some of the questions that I did have for that, which are directly related to the plan that you presented today. And I'm probably going to run out of time, such as the nature of this. But I believe it's either Ms. DePina or Mr. DePina, Ms. Coakley, or Superintendent Casilius will have the answers for these. But in terms of the BPD 1.1 reports, what's the new plan for how Boston Public Schools, what goes to BPD? What information are we sharing to BPD?
I'll let Ms. Coakley, Chief Coakley-Grice talk about that, or Mr. DePina, either one.
Thanks. Yeah. So right now, the new policy really significantly restricts what goes to Boston Police. It limits what we provide. I'm pulling up now the actual list so I don't misspeak.
I have a list as well, Sam.
Yeah. So the only thing, misdemeanor crimes that do not involve weapons, controlled substances, assault and battery, sexual behavior or threats will not be documented in a police report. Instead, must be documented SIS. So that's kind of what happens.
So those are the ones that don't go to BPD, are you saying?
Yeah, exactly. Those ones that don't go to BPD. And then the ones that do go to BPD are the misdemeanor crimes that occur that would need to be reported. So misdemeanor crimes.
So hold on. So I know felony crimes get reported.
Right.
You're saying misdemeanor crimes as well would get reported?
Some misdemeanor crimes, yes. If they
so
raise
would an assault, so would an assault and battery be reported?
If it was grave enough and caused bodily injury and safety, and the victim wanted to pursue a criminal action, then yes.
And so that's kind of so I think part of that is that leaves for a wide scale of assault and batteries, right? That's a pretty wide, I was a criminal defense attorney before this, so I could tell you that that's a pretty wide, vague sort of breakdown for that.
But yes and no, the new policy also though has the school administrator needs to be consulted when any incidents happen on school grounds. And then the school administrator is going to help determine kind of the level of consequences that occur as a result of the incident. So not all of them will be funneled to BPD, but it has that screening process that happens first after an incident happens at school, so that there is no automatic reporting to Boston Police. So there is that little time period.
So that's actually a part of my question. So basically, does a school administrator get to say, this doesn't get reported, this does get reported? Does the school, do they have final say on that?
They don't have final say. They have a lot of input on that, and they greatly influence what goes forward. Because if it's something that can handle as a code of conduct matter, that's our preference, and that's the direction we've guided everyone to do. But only the major ones that are really significant and cause significant harm, those will be the ones that will tend to get forwarded along to BPD. And again, if victims want to make sure they pursue criminal action against their perpetrators, then those will also be sent forward.
So it sounds like what I just heard is the administrator can say, I don't think this should be shared, but it can still be shared.
Yes.
Okay. In terms of BPD 1.1.
And that would then mean, Counselor, that we need stronger training for administrators as well, not just our Boston School Police, but that we are going to be training our administrators on our new policies.
Yeah. And so how many BPD 1.1s do you know how many BPD 1.1s have been filed with BPD this year?
This year so far, we have a number of reports.
I see I got 50 seconds.
Yeah, we can get that number for you. I don't have the number of BPD reports that were actually filed. No.
We can certainly get that for you, Counselor.
Yeah.
And we can get you a copy of the policy if you don't have it as well.
I appreciate that. I have the policy. I'm reading the policy. I'm just trying to make sure that I'm clear on the policy. In terms of the chain of command, who filters these? So the school police officer, this is my final question due to time. School police officer writes a police report. They notify the school administrator. Then they send it directly to BPD. Is that the chain of how that works? Is there one person who's this is all getting funneled to, who's getting say? How is it each school on their own? How is that working?
Once they do a police report, it automatically goes into BPD's system. It depends on what. So what we're saying is that it depends on if they write a police report. It depends on what the circumstances are surrounding that incident. If a police report is done, it goes on. That goes through BPD. That means it's a BPD.
So the BPD immediately upon being written is at BPD, basically.
They put it in, they go to the station.
And so the only thing that happens is a police officer, school police officer, speaks to an administrator, says, I would like to file this report, or I think I should file this report, or what do you think about this report? And then once they write that report, it's immediately accessible to BPD and possibly ICE. Is that basically, is that the roadmap?
No, we don't share.
Once it's with BPD, you have no say, correct? No. Once BPD has it, BPS doesn't have any say about how BPD uses that report, correct?
That is correct. Once it goes to BPD, it is their record. And I think Kathy Lizotte might be able to speak to it. I'm not sure if she's up on the panel, but she could speak to the legalities of the policy, I think. And then also, once we have BPD, one of the things on the policy that we were very clear is that once it goes to BPD, it is not put into our student record.
Okay, and I know that my time is up and I don't want to take up time for my colleagues, but this is why it would be incredibly important for you to show up to hearings that we're discussing these things at. And I am disappointed that we didn't get a chance to do that. And so I'm going to cede the rest of my overtime because I know I went overtime. So thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for trying to answer that in within like 3 minutes. But hopefully in the future, we can do more on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Arroyo. And I think through that question, there's a few pieces of information that we'll get via email or some other way. I think Councilor O'Malley is no longer with us. Councilor Campbell is no longer with us. Councilor Flynn.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Sabi George. I was over the Blackstone School during the pandemic for a food relief effort. And my question is about the library at the Blackstone School. I haven't had a chance to follow up with the principal yet, but can you just tell me how the library over at the Blackstone is working, what challenges they have, what is the status of it, and what are we doing to help it? What are we doing to improve it? Just any general information you might have would be helpful to me.
Sure. The St. Stephen's Church funds the library position, and they have generously donated the collection that is there. So that I know. There has been a change of command, but they're still planning on funding 10 hours a week, and that's what, and plus this cadre of very committed volunteers. I don't know the actual budget because it's not a BPS in regards to how much money they actually raise a year, but they contribute a substantial amount of money overall to the building and the school program, not just the library. We've looked, I mean, I've met both the new principal, I mean, she's beginning year 2, and the new assistant principal about considering other locations because it's so front and center that it's really hard to have a class, if you will, in that space. And we, so we've kind of played around with that. Let me know if do you have more questions or?
I think the information you provided was very helpful. I know
Okay.
the library, when you're walking up the stairs on the right, is kind of out in the open. Right. And so it can be a little noisy if you're in there trying to do a little bit of reading. But I just want to let you know, whatever I can do to be helpful. I love the Blackstone School. It's in the middle of, it's in the middle of the Villa Victoria in the Cathedral Public Housing Development, down the road a little bit from the Lenox development. So you have one of the most diverse areas in the city, and we have a lot of students from East Boston as well. But I would like for us to continue talking, and maybe we can be as helpful as we can to the library at the Blackstone. But thank you for thank you for your question, and maybe we can talk offline down the road a little bit.
Would be happy to.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Sabi George, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor Flynn. Councilor Mejia.
Yes. So, I'm going to get on my little soapbox for a quick second. It's disheartening to hear that St. Stephen's is the one with their little nonprofit status self are the ones that are funding that library initiative at the Blackstone. When I just heard Councilor O'Malley talk about the library that BLA or BLS or one of those exam schools is just getting. So Dr. Casillas, when we talk about equity, when we talk about making sure that those who are in the most need have the type of support and resources that they need, this is the sort of stuff that these inequities are the ones that really boil my blood, because this is a shame that St. Stephen's, a nonprofit organization that's based in a church, is the one that's funding the Blackstone in their little library. That is a shame. I'm so disappointed by that.
Counselor,
I'm just going on my.
No, I agree with you, and it is also that we have several schools that don't have libraries, and
but
so
that's a shame.
we have to do both. We have to put money in the budget and take care of literacy, which is basic to learning. It is a priority.
But we should not have to rely on nonprofit organizations that are already struggling and having them bear that cross. That's all I'm saying. So let me move on to my questions. In regards to the breakdown for the librarians, I think we already talked about the language access issue, but I'm just curious about the selection of your development policy. How are you activating communities to determine important materials to include? I'll come back to that. The other question that I have specifically, Sam, I think it was you that I wanted to know about the information sharing policy. How was it created, and who did you work with to create this policy?
I have that,
Just really quick.
information right here. So we had since last June to August, we met about 11 times. We had Juma Crawford from the Lewis Family Foundation facilitated. And then the working group consisted of co-chair Alex Oliver Davila, superintendent, high school task force, Danya Vasquez from Muniz Academy, the school leader to have her perspective, the Peer Project, Greater Boston Legal Services, the Muslim Justice League. We had a parent representative. We had our equity office represented. We had Kamani James, which is the BPS student representative at the time, unafraid educators participated,
Okay.
Strategy for Youth, myself, Student Immigrant Movement, and the Office of the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement.
Thank you for that. So this is for my dear friend, Chief Coakley. Just get ready for this one. I'm just curious, you know, I see a lot of your police officers out here leading amazing mentoring programs. Oftentimes they're coming out of their own pockets to produce these activities. And I'm just curious, you know, we expect folks to do miracle work with very little resources. And I'm just curious, how can BPS and the council commit to making their roles and to mentor easier?
Well, we're working on that. We just passed budget season. We're also just passed the deadline for grants that went in. Unfortunately, I just didn't have a lot of time. I came in just 12 weeks ago. So right in that whole process, it's a very, very competitive process as well. But that is definitely higher on the agenda for next year. We're not going to let that stop us, though. We're still going to be very involved in a lot of community organizations, having a lot of partners within the city that supporting a lot of the causes that we have now. So we're getting a lot of funds. Like I said, we just got a bunch of 2,000 toys from Marines Toys for Tots. Look like we're going to get about 50 turkeys that are going to be coming in on Friday. We're going to help distribute those to community members. And so what we're doing is we're partnering with different organizations so that need an extra hand, we'll be able to help and support that. So we're going to not going to let direct funds to those services be the reasons why we don't work with them this year. But next year we will definitely be on that on that mission of applying for some of those grants.
Yeah, and I think the council and BPS needs to be a little bit more mindful of how they can support those services and put their money where their mouth is and pour resources into your department so that you can continue to do those programs so that your officers aren't coming out of their own pockets. Sam, you mentioned installing filters in schools that will accommodate them. Can you provide a list of schools that can and cannot accommodate these changes? You don't necessarily need to do a list here, but it would just be great if we can get a list of those that can be accommodated to improve the filter system. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. And I've got a couple of wrap-up questions myself. Just very quickly, Dr. Froggatt, do we have a clear path, or why isn't there a clear path? Because I think we, through the presentation, we understood that there is no clear path for paraprofessionals to become librarians in the school system. And then also for in-person learning, as we hopefully shift to hybrid and then eventually full in-person learning, are we using libraries or other non-traditional classroom spaces to de-densify our classrooms? And then how will we utilize the space of in-school libraries to make them central, especially as we look to redesign through Build BPS? We want to, I think want to make them central to student life and activity. And how do we create that environment in our school libraries, both from a sort of design perspective and also from a professional development perspective?
In regards to library paras, seeking certification, I've been in, I know that the city has a program that allows city employees to get grants. I think it's BU and Northeastern, and I've been working with Simmons trying to, for the last 2 or 3 years, to have that happen. And now we're finally getting to that point. It would be great if we could get the city involved as well, because there is that program. So that paras that have college degrees can step in and begin their the certification process, so that it will continue to work on that. As I said, I've been trying to do that for a little while. In regards to I should have written down question 2. Help me out here.
Question 2 was are we using school libraries?
Yes, it varies across the district. Some the libraries are completely shut and they're using it to lessen the numbers in classrooms. Some are not. So there isn't a consistent path to that. It depends on the nature of the school, the size of the school, and so on. Library team members and professional libraries are collaborating with teachers and supporting students in a variety of ways as well. And then finally, as we think of Build BPS, I know that in the plan, and I've been on and off the committee for numerous years, there is a place for a media center in each of the new renovated or new schools. And the idea, the model of a learning commons model, a flexible 21st century learning space is one that Tech Boston, for instance, in their beautiful learning commons has employed. So there is research to back up the need for a place with a certified person that can collaborate with teachers, teach students, curate collections, embed 21st century learning research skills into the academic content, and team teach and collaborate. So there is a model that I, again, would be happy to share some of that research in regards to the planning as we move ahead.
Great, excellent. And I know that you talked a little bit about that in your earlier presentation, and I appreciate and value your efforts to be included in Build BPS, because as we look at redesigns, we might as well add and make sure we're adding thoughtfully designed library spaces to that, and sort of the suite of services that may go with them and fit neatly with them. So thank you for that. My other question, someone have something to add? My other question is around, when we think about school safety, I think about sort of the need for mental health support services to be in all of our schools. And, are we looking at the role of full-time mental health professionals in every school to be part of our safety plan? Because we think about any one of our kids who have their needs unmet, that when they come into our school communities, they're in a moment of time that they could put others in danger, but also, we need to be there to support our kids. So I just wonder, and then, the significant impacts of this pandemic on so many of our kids. I just wonder where, I think we're loosely related, but I think they need to be very intimately related when we think about mental health services and school safety across the board.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are absolutely looking at support services for students. As you know, it was a big part of the budget before I came here, with the adding of nurses. Then last year, as we added the social workers and family liaisons to support families, for our and psychologists as well, for our more full service community school preparations for when we move to that more broadly. And so I think as we begin to work on the budget for next year, which we're already starting to think about, we are looking at how do we think about how we provide additional support and services around mental health, around family services, around partnerships, those kinds of things that really we know are needed during this COVID response time.
Great, thank you very much for that. And so I'd like to not do a full round, but if any colleagues do have one more question for this panel, we have another panel following. Councilor Braden, Councilor Arroyo, Councilor Flynn, Councilor Mejia. If you've got an additional question.
None for now, but I really would like to meet with Chief Coakley sometime soon. Well, I need to make a date.
Excellent.
Let's do it.
All right, thank you, Councilor Braden. Councilor Arroyo, quick question to wrap up this panel.
None for now. I'll email them in.
Beautiful, thank you. Councilor Flynn and then Councilor Mejia.
None for me. Thank you to the panelists for being here.
Thank you. Councilor Mejia.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to the panel for being here. I know I could be a little feisty, but you know you love me. Thank you.
All right, so thank you, Superintendent, and your team for being here and being both thorough with your presentations, which we'll make sure to share the slide deck with the council, and look forward to continued conversations, because there's certainly that the work has to continue, and I appreciate all of your efforts and being so forthcoming today. So we're gonna ask you to sign off, and we're gonna bring in our next panel. Of course, you could stay and listen and observe, but we'll move on to the next panel.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, counselors.
Thank you, Superintendent. So as we have the next group coming in, I just want to, I gotta find my list here. I am going to just recognize who is on that panel, who's coming in. We have Jessica Tang, President of the Boston Teachers Union, Barbara Fields from Boston Network for Black Student Achievement, Citizens for Public Schools, and Black Educators Alliance of Mass, or BEAM. Ruby Reyes, who's the Director of the Boston Education and Justice Alliance. Al Vega, who's the Director of Policy and Programs for Mascosh. Felicia Humphreys, who's a librarian at Excel High School. And we're hopeful to have Cassandra Samuel, who is a library paraprofessional at the Curley K-8. So as you folks are coming on in, give it a few more minutes for folks to. All right, while we're waiting maybe for a few others to join, we'll just get started. Barbara, you were on my list as after President Tang, so I'd love to go to you first, if that's okay, if you'd like to offer some remarks.
That's fine. Thank you so much. And good evening or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Barbara Fields. I thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm speaking as a member of the Build BPS Coalition, composed of organizations that were convened in 2017 as a result of the release of the Boston Public Schools 10-year facilities plan. Represent within the coalition are civil rights, parent, education, and community agencies and organizations. For decades, many of us have advocated for a facilities plan based on an equity analysis of the needs of families in the district, the condition of existing BPS facilities, and the resources currently and potentially available to upgrade those facilities. Due to our collective concerns about the plan, we have been in communication with the district over several years, providing our feedback, suggestions, and recommendations for improvements to the plan. Our concerns with the plan are based on the disparities and inequities that we believe are embedded in the plan, inequities that permeate many of the policies, procedures, and decisions made in this district and city affecting our students and schools. When the facilities plan was launched, we asked that the plan be revised to include a 10-year timetable for facility improvements, relocation, construction, and closure of any schools, and analysis to determine if plans are equitable by race, socioeconomic status, neighborhood, disability, and linguistic groups, and impact analysis to understand the effects on current and future students, families, and neighborhoods in the city, a financial report including estimated costs for rebuilds, relocations, maintenance, program expansions, swing space, etc., and an educational plan regarding programs, grade configurations, extended learning time, student assignment, etc. We continue to await these responses included in the plan. We are now confronted with the conditions of our facilities in the midst of a pandemic, with conditions that threaten the safety of our school community that can have life or death ramifications if we don't make the right decisions. Build BPS is a plan of the future that goes back to the past. Decisions previously made that increase segregation and inequity among our schools has placed our highly vulnerable student populations at greater risk of not experiencing the necessary resources, academic and social emotional support, etc., required for educational success. And in light of all of this, what has COVID-19 taught us? It has taught us that so many of our past decisions have left the district susceptible and unable to ensure a safe educational learning environment for all of BPS students and staff. COVID-19 has taught us that the inequities of the past are perpetuated and present decisions being made that continue to disadvantage the same populations of students and communities who have always been disproportionately impacted. Our Black, Latinx, special needs, ELL, low income, and other students are within that population of which I speak. This city, the mayor, appointed school committee members, school officials, and elected officials are quite comfortable using equity jargon, but its meaning is not often reflected in actions taken. That our facilities need air quality equipment enhancement, while the mayor is expending $2 million of COVID-19 federal relief funding on tourism ads, is alarming at a time when our students cannot safely breathe in our buildings. Placing fans in school windows may have been well-intentioned, but is not a realistic nor adequate solution. If COVID ended tomorrow, our facilities still require upgrades for air quality just as they did pre-pandemic. They are needed now. COVID has taught us the importance of effective planning and thoughtful foresight, that we cannot wait on DESE, the governor, and others to guide us in what is in the best interest of our students. The unprecedented, all-encompassing nature of COVID demands that we bring BPS stakeholders to the table to flesh out a comprehensive short and long-term facilities plan to respond to the complexities of serving all of our students and serving them well and safely here in Boston. Not doing so results in confusion, disappointment, ill feelings, and yes, anger. The pandemic has taught us, after many years of disinvestment, the condition of our facilities need urgent care and attention. Our facilities must be upgraded. The 10-year Build BPS facilities plan must be revisited, revised, updated with the knowledge gained from this experience. It must include a thorough equity analysis to address the perpetuation of institutional racism that undergirds the plan in who is included and excluded, whose needs were addressed up front, and who remains without attention. The assessment of all facilities should be reviewed for accuracy. Why is it that the West Roxbury High Complex and the Jackson Man Complex were not cited in the assessment data as being in such disrepair that they warranted closing? Why was there no mention of removing the green, open space at the McCormick Endeavor when the students, the entire school community, and the Harbor Point community unanimously and vigorously opposed it? COVID has taught us the value of outdoor open space. Some of our students must have a mass break in an outdoor open space. Where is the racial justice that we all say we are seeking? As recent as today, the Globe published a story including the name of 4 schools selected to reopen for high-need students on Monday. How can opening buildings based on which principals say they are ready be the criteria for our students to gain in-person schooling? Isn't it this city and our education mayor's responsibility to ensure that all our schools are ready, to move heaven and earth to get our young people back into safe schools so that our teachers and parents' good relationships that are so critical to the education of our children are not weakened? The current situation is also eroding precious work invested in eliminating the opportunity gaps. The students who comprise the gaps are home without the level of instruction, resources, services, and support desperately needed. Yet these are the students to whom we say we are committed. COVID is reminding us that we as a city continue to fail these students and families. And hopefully the COVID has taught us to truly engage all partners, to be inclusive, that all hands on deck means just that. There is no problem, not even this horrific pandemic, that we cannot solve. If all opinions are heard, considered, if there is authentic community engagement, and if decisions are made that value the education of all students. So let's use this pandemic as an opportunity to learn from our past, to take the funding generated locally from the state and the federal government to upgrade our schools, formally adjust our class sizes to enable social distancing, to provide the necessary equipment for school staff, and truly put equity at the center of our decision-making and eradicate institutional racism from all policies, procedures, and practices within the Boston Public Schools. And thank you so much for the time.
Thank you very much, Barbara, for that testimony. Next, we'll go to Ruby Reyes.
Thank you. My name is Ruby Reyes, and I'm the director of the Boston Education Justice Alliance. Thank you for the counselors for holding this hearing, and thank you to the other panelists. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Build BPS. In March 2017, it marked the start of Build BPS, a 10-year plan where Mayor Walsh promised to put $1 billion of city and state funds to upgrade aging BPS building and infrastructure. What has resulted thus far includes school closures, mergers, reconfiguration, and the selling off of BPS properties that increase gentrification in communities of color. Over the past several years, there has been a destabilization of school communities, a lack of vision and decisions that have continued to hurt and traumatize school communities made up of primarily people of color specifically. The lack of long-term planning and visionary leadership has exacerbated the impact of the pandemic on schools that have experienced significant years of divestment at the city and state level. At the state level, the Student Opportunity Act was unanimously passed in November 2019 to update the over 20-year funding formula for public education resources. Those funds have not been committed through the state budget. We once again see state legislative policy that has been created but not carried out in terms of funding. At the city level, BPS schools have experienced cuts over the years that have set many school communities back. For example, over the past 2 years, East Boston schools, their budgets have been cut by over $2 million, despite the rampant overdevelopment, and now we see some of the highest COVID rates in the city. Mayor Walsh determines how much or how little BPS receives, and while BTU contract negotiations have led to increases in funding such as school nursing staff, the steady decrease of the prior years have taken their toll. Most recently, this divestment and the pandemic have resulted in continued irresponsible support for high-need students who need to receive in-person services in safe spaces. In October 2018, under Walsh's selected interim superintendent Laura Perrell and 4 of the current 6 school committee members, West Roxbury Educational Complex was closed. The building was deemed unsafe by one of Walsh's former top aides, Inspector Buddy Christopher. Christopher took a leave of absence in September 2019 amid a federal bribery investigation under allegations of influence peddling at the Zoning Board of Appeals. Since closing the West Roxbury Educational Complex, the Boston Police Department has used the building several times, even though it was deemed unsafe. The decision and process was not part of Build BPS. With REC also came the announcement of the closure of the McCormick Middle School in Dorchester. After several months of heart-wrenching trauma, the McCormick School community worked with BPS staff to reconfigure to serve grades 7 to 12 and merge with the Boston Community Leadership Academy. In August 2020, before BPS developed a plan for high-need students to return to in-person learning, the school committee approved giving away the McCormick School's fields to the Boys and Girls Club, despite the McCormick School community and surrounding Harbor Point residents overwhelmingly saying they wanted to keep their green space. The decision was passed with only 3 school committee members voting in favor of this, one of whom was recently resigned Chair Michael Lecanto. Lecanto resigned because he was making overtly racist comments in a virtual school committee meeting. Beja calls for a reversal of this decision grounded in systemic racism, and based on the fact that this school community, primarily Black and Latino, have experienced the trauma of a school closure, then reconfiguration, then merger, and now a complete disregard for their needs and voices on keeping their green space. The series of unfortunate events was also not part of Build BPS. At the end of March 2019, Blackstone Elementary was promised $5 million to address their school needs for doors and walls because their school is a 1970s style open plan. Former interim superintendent Laura Perrell announced the investment to put walls and doors and reconfigure the classrooms. Since that announcement, Blackstone families have not received any kind of work towards addressing their needs, which would have significantly supported their return to in-person learning for their majority high needs, special education, and English language learner students. The Blackstone was also not part of the Build BPS plan. Also in March 2019, the closed Rogers School in Hyde Park was unanimously approved by the school committee to be declared surplus and no longer needed for school purposes. The land and the building were to be used to help meet the needs of other City of Boston priorities, according to the decision. These priorities have led to the development of condos. This development was also not part of the Build BPS plan. In addition, in April 2019, the Jackson Man and Horace Mann schools, both in the same building, were found to be unsafe by BPS and the City of Boston. They were told that swing space would be found for them in an attempt to keep the school communities together. Most recently, Dr. Caselius reneged on her commitment to use the Edwards School as swing space for the Horace Mann students and has shared no plans whatsoever on the Jackson Man students. This school was also not part of the Build BPS plan. We find ourselves 9 months into a pandemic, 3 years into Build BPS, and a continued lack of leadership and vision for our aging school buildings. If Build BPS is supposed to be a 10-year and long-term plan for school buildings, the past 3 years, a succession of sinister events, of closures, mergers, reconfiguration, and the giving away of school buildings for gentrification have not been included in Build BPS. What has Build BPS really done? What and who is Build BPS really for? Beja and our partners once again asked for a moratorium on Build BPS until there is a thoughtful plan that actually meets the needs of our schools that are the most in need in terms of facilities. The past few years have shown that Build BPS does not do that. And I just want to also share that on student information sharing, the revised BPS policy continues to not ensure student safety, as evident by the questions and answers that Councilor Arroyo asked and was responded to in the previous panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ruby, for your remarks today. Al Vega, welcome.
Yes, thank you, Councilor Sabi George, for holding this hearing today. And thank you to all those city councilors who are able to join us this evening to hear more about next steps on Build BPS as well as school reopening. My name is Al Vega, and I'm the Director of Policy and Programs at MassCoach, the Massachusetts Coalition for Occupational Safety and Health. I'm speaking today on behalf of our Healthy Schools Initiative, and I'm also here as a member of Beja and the Build BPS Stakeholders Community Coalition. I would like to thank all of you for your work that you are doing to guide this city through this pandemic, ensuring that the voices of our students, families, teachers, paras, custodians, nurses, food service workers, bus drivers, and other school support staff have a public forum to ask the questions and provide the feedback on plans that impact our school buildings found within Build BPS Facilities Master Plan. We are glad to hear that racial equity has become a focus for the city and hope these next steps will fully support our students, families, and the broader school community once we emerge from this pandemic. I'm also mindful that sometimes in moments of upheaval, decisions of significance get made without the full, transparent community process needed to ensure that all concerns are being heard and that the needs of the most impacted communities should matter. We have seen time and time again that when concerns have been raised about any plan or any particular implementation of a phase or project, there has been a rush to make decisions, leading to the disenfranchisement of school communities and the erosion of trust between Boston Public Schools and our communities. At times, the lack of genuine response from BPS leaders has also been an indicator that at many times these decisions have already been made without transparency and remind us that Boston schools And it reminds us that Boston schools are still very much segregated by race and socioeconomic status, negatively impacting how our schools operate and are supported. Mascosh has worked with parents, students, school staff unions, and environmental health allies and academics to assess and improve building conditions for almost 3 decades. Through state and national coalitions, Mascosh and its partners have advocated for resources, policy, and standards to support green and healthy conditions for all schools. Mascosh played a key role in establishing the Healthy Schools Task Force in this city in 2002 to address environmental conditions in Boston public schools that can affect health and learning, and develop environmental policies and procedures to improve indoor air quality and school building conditions that are reported annually on to this city council. For years, we have sought to highlight the deficiencies, lack of capital investment, and lack of long-term facilities maintenance that have exacerbated public health issues such as asthma. Many of these health issues are more prevalent in Black and Brown communities, and they will continue to suffer if the needs of our BPS students and teachers are not incorporated into any future plans. Indoor air quality and ventilation, and in particular now the air exchanges per hour, have always been areas of concern for many of the schools throughout this district, and this has been acknowledged by Boston Public Schools on their Build BPS website. Replacements of HVAC systems, lack of windows, and lack of adequate ventilation have all been noted on the site, and we know that these improvements are needed to ensure all educational goals. These factors and many other issues impacting both a teacher's ability to teach and a student's ability to learn must be taken into account. Now more than ever, these concerns must be seriously taken into account as we are pushed for more in-person learning, even as COVID-19 numbers continue to rise statewide and across this country. For several months, we have been advocating to this body, the school committee, and elsewhere to consider the many recommendations outlined in a report our Health Tech Committee helped develop with the Boston Teachers Union reps and teachers as they did walkthroughs of a few schools as they prepared to ensure the safest conditions for in-person learning. Mascosh's analysis of school buildings, supplemented by its walkthroughs, finds that many Boston Public School classrooms and buildings are not yet prepared to be safely used by the students and staff. While there is still time to get these measures in place, we are quickly running out of time. Educators' attempts to plan for 3 possible models of teaching is made even more stressful when there doesn't seem to be any plan from the district or proper guidance from the state, which continues shifting how it interprets metrics and continues to dangerously politicize data to suit their agenda. K through 12 schools are still exempt from the state's DLS COVID-19 workplace safety regulations, and that's a perfect example of where it remains unclear where school staff should turn to or what will happen if the health and safety guidelines outlined by DESE and the city of Boston are not being met. The protections to prevent the spread of COVID-19 described in this document should be implemented as soon as possible, and follow-up walkthroughs and additional ongoing air quality testing should be conducted now to ensure all appropriate measures are in place. BTU has been advocating to open safe buildings as soon as possible and to ensure that all rooms that can be used safely is done, and that HIP students and families and teachers can transition back into these buildings. Rooms and buildings that are not adequate should not be used until those building spaces can be made safer. The district and the city must work diligently to find alternative spaces that can be safely used for our students in the interim. We wish to thank all custodians, facilities, engineering, and maintenance staff for all that they have taken on, because they too are committed to doing what they can to improve our facilities where possible, but we know so much more is needed. More has to be done to upgrade the school's facilities due to the unprecedented crisis our communities are facing. While we have concerns about what still needs to be done, it is the incredible commitment and effort put forth by these workers that will continue to help getting the buildings to where they are and where they need to be. With this in mind, we are very concerned that due to recent developments around negotiations with teachers regarding in-person learning has gone awry. The district has chosen to move forward without agreement on how to safely do so, jeopardizing the lives of any high-need students or high-risk teachers or staff. Instead of using this time to do more tests, upgrade more systems, and build the trust within families and teachers, the opposite has happened. Boston Public Schools has unfortunately failed to provide a real space where it is possible to help alleviate the fears folks have around in-person learning or the fear of getting sick or worse, simply by trying to do a job that many love and want to return to, but only in buildings that they feel they have the honest and transparent information that follows science to do so. We do not need to read the obituaries of any of our neighbors because the state and the city have turned a blind eye to the pandemic that is getting worse day by day. This pandemic has put a spotlight on all the problems we knew would be compounded over time if they were not dealt with then and fixed in order to allow for a quicker return to in-person learning. The Build BPS can be a plan that is truly inclusive and created under a racial equity lens only when decision makers who hold the keys are willing to share that space genuinely and incorporate what they hear from all of our community's constituents who bring much needed different perspectives. The work we do as a city and what occurs at Boston Public Schools over the next several weeks and months have the potential to rebuild some of that trust and lack of communication. For that reason, we ask you not to make any more rushed decisions of significance regarding anything connected to BPS that pertains to school buildings, school communities, school land during this time of uncertainty and upheaval. Our students and families are in the midst of an unprecedented public health crisis, and any additional stress, regardless of the end goal, would only exacerbate our Black and Brown communities' issues and would only create additional harm for our students and families. Please be cognizant of how any future decisions connected to this plan will be received and always allow for the communities to be fully engaged in the ways they deserve and the ways that should be a standard for how we make any decisions in this city. Thank you again for giving us an opportunity tonight to share our expertise and perspectives on this plan and on other BPS decisions that we know will shape the way schools function in our city for years.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Al. Some sort of distraction there. I'm sorry about that. I'm not sure if any of my colleagues have questions for this panel. I do appreciate their extensive remarks and testimony to these topic areas. Any questions from colleagues before we move on to public testimony?
Yes, I do.
Very good. Welcome, Council Mejia.
Yes, so I just want to say thank you to the advocates for your long lifetime commitment to this conversation, because we all have been having this conversation for far too long, and it just seems the only thing that changes are the characters and the outfits that we're rocking, but not much in terms of change. So I am so incredibly grateful to you all for your continued advocacy in this space. It is greatly appreciated and needed. I would like to say is that what I have just in hearing your testimony, it would have been great to have Superintendent Casillas, I don't see her here anymore, or anyone from the administration to hear you and to listen to this feedback and then create an opportunity for them to respond. I think that that was a missed opportunity in terms of what I heard here and what I heard earlier. There seems to be a disconnect. And there's no level of accountability right now because I can't follow up with the administration and ask them specific questions about what I heard right now. So that's just some feedback for us to really think about voice and holding people accountable, because now I felt like that's such a missed opportunity. And so I think that when it comes to education, it is a very traumatizing space. I think that's why so many people are beginning to lose faith again and trust in the system, because I feel like we just keep going around in circles and not much as I think we get a lot of lip service. But this isn't a new issue, and I feel like it's not so much a question, it's just really utilizing my little 5 minutes to get on my little soapbox and put a little call to action, is that we can't continue to do business as usual and expect different results. Like, I really do think that if we're really serious, we're gonna have to have the political courage and will to be more public about what we're learning. Like, I like to see things, not so much like a dashboard, but I want to see weekly updates. Like, I think that BPS has a lot of information that comes out, and oftentimes it's trickle down information, and they already have the answers or they already have a plan, but we don't know about that plan until 48 hours later. And as a city councilor, there are times when I don't even know what's happening and I hear about it in the Globe. So in terms of communication, everybody's gonna have to step it up. You know, I think that we're really gonna have to work on that, because otherwise it's just more of the same old, same old. And I think that it's important for us to seize this moment in time. And I really am happy that Al and Ruby and Barbara, you're all here holding us accountable, because this moment, COVID, has presented itself as an opportunity for us to no longer hide behind that veil of what we can't do, because that's what we've been telling our people for far too long. Now we have to utilize this moment and say, what are we going to do now, and not go back to saying, well, when COVID goes. No, what we do now has to be sustainable beyond COVID. And I agree, we need to put a pause on Build BPS, because we need to be really intentional about that process. We need to ensure that we're doing a deep dive, because when I hear that libraries and exam schools are being done, and then the Blackstone has to get funded by a nonprofit organization to have a library and space and this, that, or the other, the Blackstone doesn't even have walls. Like, I really want to do a deeper dive and let the people decide what an equitable Build BPS plan looks like. I think that we need to pause and really give the people back the power, because these are their tax dollars, and we operate as though we're asking people for favors, and we shouldn't operate in that manner. And I'm going to get off my little soapbox before I get the little shine going, but I'm here for all of it. And know that when it comes to issues of equity in the Boston Public Schools, we all, no matter what neighborhood you represent and what district you represent as a city councilor, everybody is going to have to lean in and make sure that every school in the city of Boston is living to its full potential. And that's going to take us making some serious sacrifices for that to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Councilor Flynn, do you have any questions for this panel?
Thank you, Councilor Sabi George, and thank you to the panelists for being here, for your opening statement, but for your leadership as well. I just wanted to follow up on some of Al's comments. You know, and I asked this earlier in the conversation. The impact of the environment that it has on our students, especially our students that live in and around the highway system, whether it's, you know, Chinatown or Alston and Brighton, certainly, and Charlestown as well. You know, Chinatown has the highest asthma rate of any neighborhood in New England. But what's your comments, or what do you consider what we need to do for schools in and around those types of locations, bus stops or train stations? How can we improve them with some of those major environmental challenges that we have?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely one of the things that I would say in the time that I've been at the organization for 11 years has definitely come up. I remember specifically one project that we helped to support, I believe it was an ABCD site, actually. Yeah. That's across the street from the Mass Pike right there. I forgot what street it is, but they also had, you know, lots of asthma in that particular building. And so looking at ventilation systems, filters, all those kinds of things need to be taken into consideration in terms of retrofitting and renovating existing buildings. But then when you're thinking about future development or where you're going to site buildings, all the things that you raise have to be taken into consideration when the final planning comes into place, because those are things that, as I mentioned in my remarks, Boston has a very high rate of asthma, and in some of our communities, it's 3 times what like the national average is. And so I really do think that we have to be cognizant of the kinds of things that you're pointing out, and making sure that that information is being considered by the decision makers who are developing these plans like Build BPS, so that they are, if part of the plan is to build new schools, that they're picking locations where, you know, a year down the road, they're not going to have new environmental health issues arise because they didn't realize, oh, we put this here and it's, you know, it's too close to this highway, and that the pollution from that particular source is entering into this building more so than it had it been placed, you know, several blocks away from this particular location. So those are the kinds of things that have to be considered. And I don't know if that is necessarily the case for everything that's currently in the Build BPS plan, but making sure moving forward that that is something that we have to be very, very cognizant of.
Yeah, then I appreciate those comments. And my final comment or question, I guess, is our playgrounds, parks, BCYF facilities, we want to make them as safe as possible for our students and for our young people. Many of them are located, as you know, in BHA developments as well, or BHA property. So having safe playgrounds is also a critical part of the discussion as well.
For sure. Yeah, I would say that and a lot of our focus tends to be in school buildings, but a lot of the walkthroughs that we have participated in with schools in past years have included the outdoor ground space as well, because there are sometimes things on the outside of a building that can also be contributing to poor health conditions of students or teachers.
Yeah, I agree. That's my final question. And I always think to myself, the most important part of the week is early Monday morning. And I always think of early Monday morning as the kids are going back to school from the weekend. The students are going back to school from the weekend, but we don't know what happened over the weekend in some of these playgrounds, if there was broken beer bottles or anything like that. So safety, public safety, and public health are also critical. But I want to say thank you to the panelists, Barbara and Ruby and to Al. Thank you, Councilor Sabi George.
Thank you very much, Councilor Flynn, and thank you, Barbara, Ruby, and Al, for joining us and giving such extensive testimony today. Councilor Mejia mentioned the structure of this hearing. We've tried it a couple of different ways and had some challenges a few weeks ago with setting it up the other way, and the hearing lasted several too many hours. So I trust that BPS officials and administration are watching this hearing and certainly are taking notes, and will hear feedback from others. I see Councilor Arroyo has appeared. Do you have a question for this panel, or are you here for the rest of public testimony?
Well, I'll be here for public testimony, but I do have one question for the panel.
And then if I actually, Councilor Arroyo, before you start, if I could just have any of the participants in the box who are planning on testifying, if you could just start preparing to raise your blue hand so we can get to public testimony following Councilor Arroyo. Thank you. Thank you for that interruption.
Thank you. And this will be quick. It's just one question, and it's for every panelist. Before I had this job, I also did panels, and I always used to pray that they would ask me a certain question, and I never got the question. So my question for each of you is there a question that was not asked of you today that you would like to answer specifically? Is there some target area, something that you would like to say that did not get asked of you from any other counselor? Consider me asking you that question, and just say what that question is and what the answer to that would be. Thank you.
I was hoping, I know that you, Councilor Arroyo, were asking for a benchmark on Build BPS. I feel like my testimony was kind of a benchmark of the things that were conveniently not included in Build BPS, for the simple fact that I think when it comes to sharing the BPS story, I think BPS Central Office has a tendency to highlight things as areas that it needs to grow in. So I wish you had kind of asked some of those questions. And then the other thing I wanted to also address was just how disgusting the process around the McCormick School has been, and what injustice there has been to that school community specifically. I do hope that the counselors will consider joining us and asking for a retraction of that decision by the school committee to give away their green space to the Boys and Girls Club, for the simple fact that literally only 3 of the school committee members supported it, and one of whom is now gone. So I think those are 2 really important issues. I think the other issue is around the Horace Mann School and the Jackson Mann School, whose space was deemed unsafe 2 years ago, and is now have not had like swing space plans really like shared with those communities. So those communities are really not hearing anything at all. And I think when we talk about the trauma and the harm done to school communities, not knowing is harder than having to figure something out together and problem solve, as we've seen with the McCormick community come together and problem solve and create a reconfiguration, create a merger. So I think when the district is incredibly lacking in transparency and communication with school communities, it creates way more stress and harm than them going to that school community and saying, help us figure this out, which they have not done with the Horace Mann or the Jackson Mann school communities.
Ms.
Anybody
Fields,
else?
muted. I think I saw Ms. Fields speaking, but she was muted. Still muted.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to just support what Ruby just said about the McCormick School. And I know that the city council was very much involved in and familiar with the situation around the taking away of that space at that school. And it bothers me that given the students participating in a democratic process to come and to speak with the elected officials, the members of the city council, the communities, and everyone else, that they could not see any victory. They could not see a positive result to the efforts that they put forth. And I happened to be over at the city council the day that they were going in, speaking to the different counselors. And I think they were encouraged that they were being listened to, that people understood, you know, their needs to have that space. And at a time in which everyone was saying how important it is for green space, yet we're letting them put concrete in a big building up over there. What does that say to our young people? So I think we need to revisit that. And I think we need to do justice for those children and for that community by giving them back their space. All they're asking for is space around a school building. If we go to the suburbs and other places, what do they have? They have space, green space around their schools. Why are we removing it from two schools? Because the Dever and the McCormick are there, and acting as if we have no power to do anything about it. When we have a city council that has been elected, that the voters have empowered to be the advocates for them. I would just, implore you to really do as Ruby suggested, revisit that and give those young people back their area to be outside and to get out of brick buildings all the time.
And I think the only thing I would have wished somebody had asked me, which I think I started to talk to in my remarks, was why do we think that we haven't been able to really get a consensus plan that feels like everybody is on the same page? And I would say that the thing that's really, I think, creating an opportunity for people to believe that we can't move forward without considering what the state keeps saying, what Commissioner Riley keeps coming out and saying, what the Secretary of Education Pizer keeps coming out and saying, and basically saying that they believe it is completely safe to do in-person learning, regardless of whatever studies I might be referencing, regardless of the experts who are doing in-person walkthroughs, testing of school buildings, regardless of what the Boston Public Health Commission is even saying in terms of what they're putting out to teachers, parents, and students about the air quality tests. Those air quality tests, they keep mentioning are unoccupied, were done in unoccupied spaces, but yet they're using that to say our buildings will be safe once we have in-person learning and people are in those buildings. And that is a lie. I don't believe that we should be continuing to put out information that isn't have the details and backup to really get people to understand what it is being shared. I believe that Governor Baker and Commissioner Riley are doing our communities injustice when day after day they come out and keep changing the metrics about what they consider safe and unsafe. That just creates confusion amongst what teachers feel is safe or unsafe, confusion about what parents and families should be doing. So I believe that the leadership of this city, starting at the city council, the mayor, and the superintendent, should do what is best for us, not what the state thinks is best for us, not what Commissioner Riley thinks is best for us. We need to do what is best for our city. When it came to the reopening of businesses in this state, did Marty Walsh immediately say, "Thank you, Governor Baker, we're going to follow exactly what you said"? No, Governor Marty Walsh knew that he needed to do additional things to ensure the safety of his residents, of the people of this city. And I don't understand why that same mindset and that same commitment has not been made when it comes to figuring out what is the best way to support HIP students, HIP families, and teachers so that we can find the safe spaces and move forward and not have to be at hearing after hearing talking about how we are just disappointed, shocked, and fearful of the decisions coming out of Boston Public Schools with the backing of the Boston Public Health Commission that we are trying to have conversations with and feeling like they're not willing to engage with us either. So that's another concern. I do know that there has been recent conversations with our executive director to begin those conversations, but I will say that for the last few months, we've been trying to reach out to kind of figure out what it is they were using to come up with their side of the story, and we were not getting the type of response we felt we would get from a partner that we've worked very closely with for many, many years in the Healthy Schools Task Force. So I do believe there is this kind of political agenda that seems to be constantly used as the reason why can only listen to one side, or we can only do one thing, and somebody has to be hurt in the long run. And I don't believe that's the case. And I don't believe that this city council wants to see that either.
Thank you, Mr. Vega. I think was that everybody? Great. So I do have some folks that have joined us for public testimony. Ms. Fields, Ms. Reyes, Mr. Vega, you are welcome to stay for this portion or come off screen. I'm okay with whatever you choose. First, for public testimony, we have Travis Marshall, then Bonnie McBride and Erin Welsh, and then I'll add a few more in. Welcome, Travis.
Hi, thank you, Counselor. Thank you, Counselors, for holding this hearing. Good evening. My name is Travis Marshall. I'm a parent of 2 BPS students. I'm a member of the Bates School Site Council, as well as a member of Quest Quality Education for Every Student. And, well before the COVID-19 pandemic shuttered schools and strained public education across the country, Boston school facilities were in dire shape. School buildings less than 50 years old were declared unsafe for students and staff. West Roxbury Education Complex was closed and the Jackson Man was slated for closure. So it comes as no surprise that our Boston Public School buildings are not equipped to deal with an airborne virus that demands air filtration and proper ventilation. A resource-rich city with 100-year-old classrooms and ill-fitting fans wedged into cracked windows should frankly embarrass us all. This crisis has further illustrated the urgent need for updating school buildings in Boston. We need a comprehensive construction plan, including a clear schedule for equitable renovations across the district. Often our city's loudest and most privileged voices secure facilities upgrades and resources for their schools first, and any citywide construction program must recognize and rectify this inequity. Earlier iterations of the Build BPS plan seemed as focused on consolidation as they were on renovation. Many schools on desirable parcels of land fear that their communities will be dismantled as part of any construction plan. Indeed, when the district first unveiled Build BPS, its first moves were to close schools. One has to wonder whether the city's reluctance to apply for Massachusetts School Building Authority funds stems from the requirement to maintain buildings as K-12 schools into the future. We hear a lot about dropping enrollment in BPS, and while there are many factors driving this trend, including the decline of school-age population in the city, I would submit the following is yet another reason. Prospective BPS parents gauge our city's investments in its children by how it treats them. Families touring schools are often met with the grim sight of dilapidated buildings, inoperable windows, mold, and lead-tainted water. Despite the skill and dedication of BPS teachers and staff, our buildings speak for how the city values our children. Given the first impressions of the BPS, is it any wonder that parents assume they will find better care at a newly built charter school or Metco placement or private school? Planning for the future means more than assuming current trends are written in stone. BPS still educates the vast majority of students in our city. And with tangible and equitable investments in facilities and programming, it can again regain enrollment and prove to families that they are wanted here. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for holding this hearing today.
Thank you, Travis. Next, we have Bonnie McBride and then Erin Welsh. And then I've also brought into the room Sabrina Barroso. Bonnie?
Good evening. My name is Bonnie McBride, and I'm here both as a resident of the city of Boston in Jamaica Plain and as the teacher librarian at Fenway High School in Mission Hill, where I have been able to welcome a number of city councilors over the past 5 years who are able to see firsthand what a staffed library looks like and how it becomes the heart of the school, both for academics and for the social emotional wellness of our students. I could tell you all about the different studies that show the enormous impact a school library staffed by a certified librarian has for students. I could also tell you about how my students will chase me down on those few occasions I have to close the library to ask, why can't they get into their space? I could tell you that in the last year, in our abbreviated in-person school year, my 386 students checked out and read an average of 9 books per student. And as an aside, all of those books are purchased with money fundraised by my school because BPS does not provide funding for library resources. But I don't need to talk about those things because by calling this hearing, it is clear to me you understand the value a school library brings to the school community. Yet every day I constantly advocate for school libraries in Boston. And this is because the current student-weighted formula used to create the individual school budgets. What this means is that school leaders need to choose between what are unfortunately considered at many schools to be extras: gym teachers, art teachers, music teachers, librarians. This funding method for school librarians must change. The funding needs to come from a central place and not just be an option for schools. This current funding situation means there are grave inequities between schools in our district, where some schools have 2 librarians and many more have none. And the current funding formula is also a clear barrier for library paraprofessionals in terms of getting their certification. Because why should they give up their guaranteed current job to become certified when they're not even guaranteed they would be rehired by their schools? I asked the City Council and the school district to prioritize rethinking the funding for school libraries and school librarians so that every student has access to a certified teacher librarian staffing a well-resourced school library, where they will have the opportunity to find the joy of reading, to pursue inquiry, and find a place to call their own. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bonnie. Next, we have Erin Welsh and then Sabrina Barroso. Welcome, Erin.
Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me? All right. Yes, thank you so much, Counselor, for this opportunity. I'm going to talk really fast so we can get to the next person. So my central purpose for sharing this testimony is to help expedite the return for in-person learning safely for all students. I speak for myself and on behalf of a group of BPS parents, the Parents for In-Person Learning Committee, who are collaborating to get all the kids back to school safely using all resources necessary. We insist that we set a date, have a checklist for all to see to track progress, and to work together to achieve the goal of returning by the set date. Thanks to all of you for all of your hard work to drive this effort forward. I'm inclined to have a particular concern for environmental safety because of my profession in the infection control and air safety business as the Northeast Region Business Development Manager for HEPA-CART infection control technologies and dust containment systems. I'll quickly share a bulleted list of requests I've compiled. Then if I have time, I'll ask a couple questions, and Counselor, you can let me know. Okay, so pertaining specifically to COVID safety in the BPS schools, I'm urging City to ensure the following. 1, that schools establish and maintain a minimum required number of air changes per hour for classrooms and make that minimum publicly available. Number 2, that classroom air is filtered using hospital grade filters, which are verifiably rated for the efficiency that's claimed by the manufacturer. And I wonder if the air purifiers that have been ordered can meet that criteria. The classroom air, verifiable, meaning that each and every filter used in each and every machine needs to have been tested and rated by the Institute of Environmental Sciences and Technology. Number 3, that nurses' offices and isolation rooms utilize far UV technology such as HEPACART brands GermBuster far UV air disinfection machine that pairs ultraviolet technology with hospital grade HEPA. That number 4, that schools implement negative and positive air pressure using the building's HVAC system or in-room or portable equipment where needed. Pertaining specifically to COVID's collateral risks, I'm urging the city to ensure the following. Number 1, that asthma concerns are addressed for students and faculty, such as by utilizing air filtration, cleaning equipment, and supplies designed to reduce the amount of chemicals required. Examples of this equipment are presented in the documents that I submitted. Also addressing asthma concerns, I urge the school to utilize mobile containment carts designed to contain airborne pathogens and contaminants for ceiling or wall access during maintenance, renovations, construction, such as the HEPACART mobile containment cart. Continuing the collateral COVID risks, the city should ensure, number 2, that surfaces are safe to touch with regard to cleaning chemicals. Number 3, that faculty receive training on how to safely use and store cleaning products while students are present to avoid inhalation, skin and eye contact, and ingestion. The faculty receive training on dispensation and storage of hand sanitizer to prevent eye contact, inhalation, and ingestion. I urge the city to ensure that in-room or portable equipment in use offers individual testing for particulates and leakage and certification for each and every unit. Number 2, energy savings. Number 3, rugged construction suitable for a long lifespan in commercial applications. Number 4, appropriate noise level. Number 5, easy operation with indicator lights and easily changed filters, because these machines don't provide a benefit to safety if they're confusing to use or clogged up. Number 6, that the schools have a specific plan for changing filters appropriately. Number 7, that the equipment comes with reliable customer support here in the US for rapid service troubleshooting and replacement parts. These machines don't offer safety if they're broken, of course. To achieve these outcomes, I urge the city to evaluate in-room and portable equipment available from HEPACART, including the following, which are ready to ship now versus the ones that have been ordered that it sounds like maybe on back order. HEPA Force line of products, which meet the criteria I just listed using hospital grade HEPA down to 99.99% efficiency and far UV technology. I urge the city to evaluate other infection control equipment designed to contain airborne contaminants, such as HEPACART mobile dust containment carts, anti-room modules, Stark modular temporary walls, walk-off mats, and other equipment. I'm available to provide additional equipment information and how to properly calculate for adequate air changes. Reference materials related to ASHRAE standards and other reference materials are included in the documents I submitted. My contact information is included, and I look forward to assisting the city and the schools with the reopening effort. If I have one question, well, I just wanted to request also that I could have a follow-up with Mr. DePina, if that's something you could help me arrange, Counselor. And I'm done. You're muted, Counselor.
Thank you. I went through most of that without it. Thank you very much, Erin. Next, well, we had Sabrina. I've lost Sabrina. If you want to raise your hand in the wait room, I will bring you back over. Next, we have Valeria Dovali and Iliatich Nayeli Tabora, and I'm sure I've not done that justice. Valeria?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
We can hear you. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, City Councilors, for a great hearing and asking really difficult questions that we definitely need to get answers for. My name is Valeria. I'm with the Student Immigrant Movement. As the City Councilors mentioned before, we had a hearing about school safety measures in terms of the student privacy policy a few days ago, where BPS was not present. I am also here on behalf of my family members who are currently in BPS and as a former BPS student. It's really difficult to hear the amount of inadequacies and things that are being said from BPS that we know is not accurate. I want to deeply thank and extend all my gratitude to all the organizers and panelists from the organizing table who shared their remarks today. I share the same frustration that they do, organizing and trying to connect with BPS for the creation of better systems and accountability. And I want to plead and beg the city councilors to continue to hold BPS accountable. It is, I don't even have the words to say how frustrating it is that not only will they not stay and hear what we have to say, but let alone, like I said in the previous hearing, they weren't even present. And to me, that is a coward move. If there is anyone that needs to be a coward here, it's me, for being an undocumented person and my members who come out and speak out on the injustices that are happening. The organizers who put their lives on the line literally every single day to create a better community. And they show up every single day, and BPS and other administrations that have to do with these issues do not show up. And that is, they have nothing to lose. They have nothing to lose. They only have things to gain from showing up and from hearing from us. And this was alluded to by Ruby, but I just want to extend that I think she was just being too nice and she didn't say it, but BPS needs to get off their high horse and ask for help. I want to commend City Councilor Mejia for telling the truth and stating the truth, which is that organizations are having to fill the gaps that BPS is not filling, the disparities that they are not filling. And it is not okay that they are relying on our funding to create these measures to fill these gaps. And like I said, they need to be open to working with more community groups. It is not enough. They mention all the time that they're going to work, and the feedback they'll get is from BSAC, but BSAC is directly connected to them, and their members are suppressed all the time. BSAC members are suppressed all the time from working on issues that they care about and that they know they need to work on. And so I just hope, to be brief, because people have said that a lot of good things tonight, I just want to beg again and plead the city councilors to, even if you don't agree with all that is being said, please just acknowledge that there is something deeply troubling and deeply wrong that is happening with BPS that needs to be fixed immediately, and that has been going on for years, and that this is an opportunity for us to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valeria. Next, we have Ilyich Nayeli Tabora. All right, as we wait for her to maybe join us, we'll go to Lena. Welcome, Lena.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, something's wrong with my video, so I don't think you can see me, can you?
We can see you and hear you.
Oh, well, I can't see myself, but that's okay.
Welcome.
I know what I look like. Okay, yes, my name is Lena. Sorry, I'm almost speechless. My name is Lena Papayanas. I'm a BPS teacher. Long time no see to everybody because I was here on Tuesday. Thank you, counselors, for allowing me to testify today, even though I signed up late because I just heard about the specific topics of today's hearing after the hearing had started. It's tough to compose myself because I'm very angry that after standing us up at Tuesday's hearing on school safety, multiple members of the superintendent's team decided to testify on the matter here today. And really, this is a blatant disregard for community voice. It's frankly undemocratic, and rendered even more so by the fact that they're not even here anymore. So I'm talking to them through YouTube if they're even listening at all. So I think we just need to call this what it is. It's BPS choosing to ignore the public, deciding instead that it's better for their already unstable reputation, I guess, to hold what essentially amounts to a press conference at the beginning of this hearing, thinking that none of us would be here, I guess. So it's clear to me that the point of the scheduling change for them was to be able to tell a one-sided story without being challenged. And this is dishonest. And like Valeria said, it is cowardly. But thankfully, we are very civically engaged. And so I was doing my grading on this laptop and I was able to kind of step away from my actual work to address some of what I heard during the panel from the superintendent and her team. So I'm just going to spend a couple minutes talking about a couple points, and I will be brief. I'm just going to start with the cosmetics that are offered as evidence of policing change in our schools. And I'm talking about the comments about our school police distributing PPE, collecting toys and distributing them, the social media hits that Chief Coakley-Grice discussed, the uniform changes. And of course, don't get me wrong, I am not anti-PPE, and there's a whole other conversation to be had about that. I'm not anti-toy, I'm not anti-scary uniform, but I am very much against the presentation or the misrepresentation of superficial tweaks as substantive change. Chief Coakley-Grice said, "You can't really make a change unless you do something different." And I completely agree with her. So what is really happening that's different here? There is some photo ops, we dress things up differently and we call that enough. This is not a makeover reality show. These are people's lives. We know that there are real changes that need to happen. And I know that the superintendent's team actually knows this, but they're not being frank with us. We know that these issues are severe because we heard them before from students. We heard from students and families that they're scared of police, including school police, no matter what the police are wearing or if they're holding a toy. And I would refer the counselors and any listeners to the city council hearing on school policing that was held on and restorative justice that was held on July 31st that Councilor Mejia mentioned earlier. There was powerful testimony from young people about their experiences, their negative experiences with police in their schools. And I'll just add again, the students are not here tonight because they didn't know that this would be discussed. And so they're doing their homework, I presume, or, Snapchat. So with those testimonies of kids in mind, when we hear Chief Coakley-Grice and the superintendent citing the fact that school police are handing out food as proof of law enforcement's positive impact in our community, I'm left very confused. I'm confused because the reason that Chief Coakley-Grice gave for BSP's, this is the Boston School Police's presence at these food sites, is to, quote, make sure everyone can come in. But who is the everyone? What about the families who don't want to come pick up food when they see a police officer there watching guard? Are we considering those families too? It looks very good for the police to be there, but is the decision to put them there really centering students' needs, as we say that it is? Is it centering the needs of families in East Boston who know that the Boston police, including the Boston School Police, communicate with ICE? Is it centering the needs of families in Mattapan or Dorchester who have legitimate concerns about racial profiling, about police brutality? I don't think it's centering them. The last piece I want to call attention to, and this piece is even more troubling to me, is one of the new key priorities for the Department of Safety Services, specifically the school police. Chief Coakley-Grice said in her part of the presentation that, quote, we will decentralize in order to, quote, empower officers as change makers. Honestly, this is horrifying. It horrifies me. Why would we want the school police to be decentralized, implying more officer agency, when the overwhelming evidence that we have is that historically, officers have operated with very little oversight, very little guidance, very little clarity on what exactly their job is, not to mention the morality or the legality of the parts of their day-to-day. So at Tuesday's hearing, I read a few emails, some of them quite recent, that show how the Boston School Police, in some places more than others, but it's not just in one school, operate as an extension, not just of the Boston Police Department, but specifically of the BRIC. And these emails were obtained as part of a lawsuit. They're not under protective order. I'm not going to reread the same ones that I read on Tuesday, but there's two quick ones I want to share here. So there's an email from a Boston School Police BSP officer writing an email directly to the people at the BRIC, people in the BPD, and people in ICE. And we know this because of their email addresses, right? When it says at ice.dhs.gov, it's an email address to somebody who works at ICE. And the BSP officer says, good morning. I attached a list of gang individuals just trying to see if they've been verified. I also included some gang members who have been already shipped out. When you guys get a chance and are able to send me the verification document, that'll be great. Thanks. So the ICE employee responds with a long list of people. And next to each one, it says verified or not verified, or we need more info on this one. The BRIC person says, in this email chain, here are those gang pages. I have blank pending in review. Another 2 fell short of being able to be added. I still have to go over the others. And so what does the BSP officer do in this situation? He responds with photos of students, their profiles with information about them, and says, thank you, sir. We have a couple of FIOs, field interrogation and observation reports, that we need to send you as well. So he's saying, I'm going to send you some reports from my school to you. I'm going to send them to the BRIC, to ICE in this email chain, right? Saying, oh, you needed more on these people? I got you, right? So let's lay to rest this lie that there's no direct communication between BPS employees and the BRIC, including ICE. It's just a farce. The second email, very quickly, There's really innumerable emails with the Boston School police officers saying that they're using Facebook or other means to identify students who are so-called self-admitting gang members. Many of these kids are middle school children. Okay, so there's middle schoolers who are saying that they're in a gang on Facebook or some social media, and Boston School Police is using their knowledge of the student body at their school or other schools to identify those kids in photos for the Boston Police Department and for the BRIC. In one example, a Boston School Police officer sends a bunch of Facebook page screenshots to other BSP officers and lists a number of students from many schools, both middle and high schools. The BSP officer then forwards it to people in the BRIC. There's no comment here for me to even quote. They just forward these things to each other. It's just a forwarded email. And that's really telling, right? Because it shows a level of informality, of regularity. There's no need for an intro or pleasantry because it's just the system, right? I get this, I forward it to you. These communications show us that changing uniforms, holding meet and greets, this is not going to solve the problem. Are we only caring about what we're wearing? It seems here that the emperor is wearing no clothes and the district doesn't want to admit it. I really hope this testimony helps to call into question the claims made by the district at the beginning of this hearing and to provide a fuller, more accurate and complete context for the landscape of policing in our schools. I still hold out hope, I really do. And we're still fighting for a school system where students can learn without fear and where we, the people, won't be lied to by the folks whose responsibility it is to protect us all, especially our children. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lena. Next, we have Nora Paul-Schultz.
Sabrina had to go because she had a family emergency. She sent me her testimony. Could I read that first?
Yes, please. Thank you.
All right, so this is from Sabrina Barroso, who is the lead organizer at the Student Immigrant Movement. And she writes, this is her voice. Listening to remarks about the student privacy policy stated by the superintendent, Sam DePina, I was troubled. Like City Councilor Arroyo stated, this administration had the opportunity to address their policy on Tuesday. Doing it now with the words they have is unfair and misleading. Actually, it's not misleading. It's just not true. This policy is far from perfect. It does not do enough to protect young people. The language that DePina used tonight about criteria for reporting, frankly, is not in writing. So it shouldn't mean anything to this council, and families should and should not be taken seriously, because if that's how they're talking about it, they should have taken our recommendation and put it in writing. As clarified earlier, this policy's language is far too vague. In short, that means reporting criteria is still out of our hands. This policy is not about accountability and transparency and honoring youth. Training, as brought up by the superintendent, means nothing if there is nothing that it is held to. If there is no frame, if there is no structure, training will not do anything if the administration does not have the intention or value to pass a real policy to direct their school police and personnel. Before the community holding BPS accountable for putting youth in danger, there's no intention to have a structure policy. In fact, we were lied to our faces in multiple meetings where the superintendent and other representatives of this administration said that this issue had been taken care of, that communication between BPS and BRIC was non-existent. You would believe my anger and hurt when I saw that in fact BPS continued direct communication with BRIC even as they lied. It is beyond reasonable for the community to be angry, frustrated, and to hold you all accountable for lying and evading to be held accountable by not coming to the hearing you were supposed to be at, and to come here tonight saying all that you have. It's a slap in the face to the young people and families who know the reality of all your actions and inactions. From all the testimony tonight and on Tuesday, it is clear it would do this administration well to practice active listening and take action. So that was her testimony. I'm now going to read my testimony. Good evening. My name is Nora Paul Schultz. I'm a BPS teacher and a resident of Jamaica Plain. On Tuesday, I had the pleasure of being on a panel for Docket 0684. On Tuesday, I spoke about the Surveillance Oversight Ordinance and how it would address the issue of information sharing among Boston Public Schools and the Boston Police Department and federal law enforcement agencies, including ICE and the FBI. I was surprised to learn this afternoon that the district was speaking on their policy that Sam DePina presented. I wanted to take some time to voice my concerns about their information sharing policy. I was on the working group that worked on the information sharing policy, and I, along with many other members of the group, had serious concerns. Let us be clear, the current BPS policy falls short in actually protecting our students. Thank you, Councilor Arroyo, for your comments and questions about BPD 1.1s. You asked some questions that those of us at Unafraid Educators in the student immigrant movement have asked for over a year. How many BPD 1.1s have been passed to BPD every year? How many are given over to ICE? The policy Mr. DePina presented gives a too broad definition for that type of incident, the type of incident that can lead to a report going to the BPD. We brought this up numerous times with the district and were not given sufficient reasonings as to why it had to be so broad. In the working group, we asked if school leaders could have a sign off on the reports. We were told that signing off the reports would not be possible. We were told that school leaders would be notified of the writing of a report, but that they could not have the final say as to when the report was written. The qualifier of if it causes bodily harm, which Mr. DePina mentioned, is frankly not in the BPS policy. We actually asked for language similar to that to qualify assault and battery. We were told that no, such language would not be possible. You can imagine my surprise to hear Mr. DePina say that was a qualifier for a 1.1 report. What he is doing in that statement is lying. He is making a policy that there's not there. The district is relying too much on training without a clear and strong policy and with no oversight. The district's policy will not do enough to stem the gushing tide of reports going from BPS to BPD and ending up in the hands of ICE or criminalizing our students. I'm horrified that Unafraid Educators' name is associated with this policy because it institutionalizes the writing of police reports without any oversight. The policy also allows that in the case of health and safety emergencies, which is not clearly enough defined, officers can share the sensitive information that is prevented sharing in incident reports. This means that student information such as religion, nationality, first language, that is often hearsay and can be used to target students can be shared with the BPD. Why are we allowing information to be passed to the BPD through phone conversation, emails when it wouldn't happen, when we know that this has been the sharing of hearsay in the past and led to the criminalization of the young people? The district's policy also allows for confirmed gang status to be shared in an incident report. We have to ask, how do school police officers communicate with the BRIC to access their gang database, which is a flawed and racist system to begin with? Do they rely on students admitting to be gang members when sometimes students claim gang affiliation for safety or to seem cool? Finally, what happens if all the reports that do not meet the guidelines put forward in the current, what happened to all the reports from the past that do not meet the guidelines put forward in the current policy? Are those still allowed to be shared and criminalize young people in our care? How are we allowing students to learn from their mistakes? The district's policy is better than having no policy as in past years, but it's still not enough to truly protect the young people in our care. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Nora. And then last for public testimony this evening, Elizabeth Badger. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Hi, good evening, and thank you for adding me to public testimony. I also did not get to hear all of the BPS presentation earlier because I wasn't aware of the hearing until last minute. But I did want to address a few of the comments that I heard Officer DePina make that, as my colleagues referenced, were, I believe,
He's not a police, he's not an officer.
the
He's
safety services,
a chief
correct?
something, yes.
Mr. DePina, thanks for the clarification. So I want to address some of the comments that he made. I will say that, as Nora just referenced, after all of the work that myself and other advocates put into working on BPS with the policy, it's disappointing to hear BPS mischaracterize and water down the most controversial parts of the policy. The two misrepresentations that I was privy to that Nora just referenced were that the 1.1 reports, which are the reports that are shared with BPD, and that then can be accessed by ICE as well as other law enforcement agencies that are connected to the BRIC, are only done when there's substantial bodily harm, which that is simply incorrect. It's not in the policy. It is part of the ordinance that was reviewed on Tuesday night of Docket 0684. The other comment was that safety services must get input, must get buy-in, if you will, from a school administrator before they can make 1.1 reports. The policy isn't written that way, and that was, again, one of the more controversial points of the policy. The policy states, the BPS policy states, that safety services are only required to inform, not get any kind of permission or buy-in. They're just required to inform a school administrator that they're writing a 1.1 report. I think myself and several other folks would be happy to do a breakdown if that would be happy for city, or if that would be helpful to city council members, of the differences between the BPS policy and the ordinance that was reviewed on Tuesday night, if that hasn't already been done.
I don't think that's been done. I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, we could definitely put that together. And I think, as others have referenced, our concerns about over-policing and over-criminalization is especially urgent given the document disclosure that we've recently received from BPD. And I know we keep referencing that, and that hasn't been made publicly available. I just want to say that is several thousand pages, and we're working on doing an analysis of that. And I hope that that can be forthcoming to city council, so that can be something that can be reviewed and referenced. But I think it is telling that if BPS has to make misrepresentations and water down the policy in their presentation, then the policy, should really be changed. Thank you for your time.
Erin, or Elizabeth, thank you very much for that. And I look forward to that comparison, if you don't mind. With that, we are all done with public testimony this evening. I appreciate everyone's attention, and this was certainly a full hearing, and one that covered some significant areas for discussion. Our libraries and librarians across the district, Build BPS, as well as school safety, again, across the district. So a lot of heavy lift, and I think a lot to digest from today's meeting, and certainly a lot of information from the second panel, as well as those that offered public testimony this evening. So I'm grateful for everyone's presence and for being with us for the duration. Certainly more to come, especially as the end of the calendar year approaches. Thank you, everybody. Good night. Thank you, Juan. Thank you, Carrie, for being here this evening. Gonna wrap that up. Carrie, I don't know if you can still hear me. Did you notice during some of the presentations that there are like black boxes around the shared screen?
I did notice that, and I think it's the program we're using to host those shared screens. So I'm going to try to get them all into PDF and see if that helps.
Yeah. And then I also noticed during that first panel when Deborah, the head of library services, was speaking, that when I unmuted myself when she was all staticky, it fixed her problem.
Huh, interesting.
Yeah. And I don't know if that was a pure coincidence, but I tested it a couple of times. But anyway, thank you for being here for this meeting. And Juan, thank you too. Have a good night.